Hi guys, tonight we step into a time so distant that even memory itself seems unsure of the path back. You find yourself standing in a wide open landscape where the air feels cleaner, quieter, untouched by anything that resembles a city, a road, or even a name. The sky stretches endlessly above you, pale with the soft fading light of evening, and somewhere in the distance you hear the faint crackle of a fire just beginning to take hold. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, you might want to share where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. It is always comforting to imagine how many different places are quietly connected in moments like this. Now dim the lights and let yourself step fully into this ancient world. You take a slow breath and the air feels different here. There is no trace of smoke from engines, no distant hum of electricity. Instead, you catch the faint scent of dry grass of soil that has not been disturbed by machines, and something else, something warm and familiar. Fire. As your eyes adjust, you notice small shapes moving near that glow. A group of people, if that word even feels right yet. They are not so different from you. A mainstream historical understanding tells us that by around 50,000 years ago, humans were anatomically modern, meaning their bodies and brains were much like yours today. If you were to stand among them, you might not feel entirely out of place, and yet everything else about their world feels quietly unfamiliar. You begin to walk closer, your steps slow, careful, the ground uneven beneath your feet. There is no path here, no worn trail guiding you. The earth feels soft in places, dry in others, scattered with small stones that shift gently under your weight. You hear your own movement more clearly than you might expect, each step a soft crunch in the stillness. The group by the fire has not noticed you, or perhaps they have, and you simply do not understand the way they look, the way they sense. Their movements are calm, unhurried. One figure crouches low, feeding thin branches into the flames. Another sits with knees drawn close, hands extended toward the warmth. You pause a short distance away watching. Historians still debate whether this period, often called the Upper Paleolithic, marked a sudden leap in human behavior, or a slow accumulation of changes that had been building for thousands of years. From where you stand, it does not feel sudden at all. It feels quiet, gradual, almost invisible. The fire flickers, casting soft light across their faces. You notice how simple everything is. Clothing made from animal hides loosely wrapped and tied. No stitching that you can see, no decoration beyond what is necessary. And yet there is a sense of care in how these things are worn, adjusted, maintained. A quirky detail that often surprises people is that even in these early times, humans were already quite skilled at making tailored clothing using bone needles and sinew to stitch pieces together. It is easy to imagine them as rough and unrefined, but in reality their survival depended on careful craftsmanship. You shift your weight slightly, feeling the coolness of the evening air settle more deeply against your skin. The temperature is dropping slowly but steadily. Without fire, this would become uncomfortable very quickly, and you might find yourself wondering as you stand there, how did they manage this every night? There are no insulated homes here, no blankets thick enough to trap warmth for hours, no glass windows to keep the cold out. Instead, there is only the fire, the closeness of the group, and the quiet understanding of how to endure. One of the figures near the fire reaches out, adjusting a piece of wood. Sparks lift briefly into the air, glowing for a moment before fading into the dark. You follow them with your eyes, watching how quickly light disappears once it leaves the flames. It feels like a small reminder of something larger. So much of this world exists only in moments. A gesture, a sound, a shared glance. Nothing is written down, nothing is recorded. When it is gone, it is simply gone. Researchers continue to question how much knowledge was lost during this vast stretch of human history, sometimes called the missing thousands of years. Without writing, without lasting records, entire ways of thinking may have appeared and disappeared, without leaving any trace at all. You take another step closer, drawn by the warmth now more than curiosity. The fire gives off a soft heat, uneven but comforting. You can feel it against your hands, your face a gentle contrast to the cooling air behind you. One of the people looks up. For a moment your eyes meet. There is no shock in their expression, no sudden movement, just a quiet awareness, as if the presence of another human, even an unfamiliar one, is not entirely unexpected. You realize then how different this world is from your own. Today we are surrounded by constant signals, notifications, voices, green messages that never quite stop. But here communication is slower, more deliberate. A glance holds meaning. A shift in posture says something. Silence itself is part of the conversation. The figure looks back down at the fire and the moment passes. You settle into a space just at the edge of the group, not quite among them, but no longer entirely apart. The ground is cool beneath you as you lower yourself, the texture of dirt and scattered grass pressing lightly against your hands. The sounds around you begin to feel familiar. The crackle of burning wood, the soft rustle of movement. A distant call from an animal somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, the wind faint but steady brushing through unseen grasses. It is a quiet kind of world, not empty but unhurried. You notice how the group stays close together, not tightly, not crowded, but within reach. A subtle distance that still allows for warmth, for awareness, for shared presence. It feels instinctive, as if they have learned over countless nights exactly how far apart to sit. Scholars remain divided on how structured these early human groups were. Some suggest clear roles and hierarchies already existed, while others believe these communities were more fluid, with responsibilities shifting depending on need. As you watch them now, it feels less like a system and more like a rhythm. One person rises slowly, stepping just beyond the firelight. You follow their movement with your eyes as they disappear into the darkness. There is no hesitation in their step, no visible fear. That too feels different. You might expect this world to be filled with constant danger, and in many ways it was. But fear here is not the sharp, sudden thing you might imagine. It is quieter, more constant, a part of the background like the cold or the wind, and yet life continues. The fire burns steadily now, its light softening as the wood settles into glowing embers. The group grows quieter. Movements slow, voices, if there were any, fade into something barely audible. You feel your own body begin to relax. There is something about this simplicity that settles you. No decisions waiting, no plans to make, just the steady rhythm of breathing, the warmth of the fire, the presence of others nearby. You lie back slowly, the ground firm beneath you. Above, the sky is vast and clear, scattered with stars brighter than you have likely ever seen. Without artificial light, the night reveals itself fully. Each point of light sharp and steady, stretching across the darkness in patterns that feel both random and meaningful. You might wonder what they see when they look up. Not constellations with names, not stories written in the stars as you know them. Or perhaps they do see stories, just different ones. Stories that will never be recorded, never passed down beyond a few generations. And that thought lingers with you. How many ideas, how many beliefs, how many small understandings of the world have existed here in moments like this, only to fade without a trace? The fire beside you gives a soft crack, a final shift, as one piece of wood settles deeper into ash. The warmth reaches you in gentle waves, and slowly, without urgency, without effort, the world begins to quiet even further. You remain there for a while, lying on the cool ground, watching the slow drift of sparks as they rise and disappear into the dark. The fire has softened, now no longer a bright and demanding presence, but something quieter, something that feels almost like a companion rather than a tool. The air grows cooler against your skin, and you instinctively shift closer to the warmth. The people around you do the same, not in a hurried way, but with small unconscious adjustments. A slight lean forward, a subtle repositioning of legs. A hand extended just a little further toward the glowing embers. A mainstream historical fact tells us that control of fire had been part of human life for hundreds of thousands of years before this moment. By 50,000 years ago, fire was not a discovery anymore. It was a constant, a central part of daily survival. It provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook food, which made it easier to digest and extract energy. But here, as you watch it flicker, it feels like something more than that. You notice how the fire shapes the space around it. Beyond its glow, the world fades into darkness. The ground, the nearby figures, even your own hands are only partially visible, defined by shifting light and shadow. It creates a boundary not just physical but emotional. Inside the circle there is warmth and familiarity. Outside there is the unknown. And you might find yourself thinking about how different this is from modern life, where light fills almost every corner of the night. Street lamps screen ceiling lights that never quite turn off. Here darkness is complete. It is something you cannot push away, only accept. One of the figures reaches into the fire with a long stick, gently nudging a piece of wood into place. The movement is careful, practiced. There is no wasted effort. Every action seems measured, as if energy itself must be conserved. A quirky historical tidbit that often surprises people is that maintaining fire was sometimes more important than creating it. Starting a fire from scratch could be difficult and time-consuming, especially in damp conditions. So groups often carried embers with them, preserving a small piece of flame as they moved across the landscape. You glance at the glowing coals and imagine that possibility, that this fire in some form may have been alive for days, perhaps even weeks, passed from place to place, carefully protected from wind and rain. It makes the fire feel older somehow, continuous. The group around you begins to settle more deeply into stillness. One person lies down, fully curling, slightly onto their side. Another leans back against a bundle of hides, their head tilted upward toward the sky. The sounds of movement grow softer, less frequent. You notice how there are no clear boundaries between activities. There is no fixed moment where work ends and rest begins. Instead, everything blends together. A task becomes a pause becomes sleep. Historians still argue whether early humans had structured daily routines similar to ours, or if their lives followed a more fluid pattern guided by light, temperature and need. From what you can see here, it feels closer to the second. There is a rhythm, but it is not rigid. It adapts, shifts, responds. You pull your arms closer to your body, feeling the cool air settle more firmly now that the heat of the fire is less intense. The ground beneath you holds a faint warmth absorbed from the earlier flames, but it's already fading. The night deepens. Somewhere in the distance you hear a low sound. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Perhaps an animal moving through the grass, or something larger, stepping carefully beyond the reach of your senses. No one near the fire reacts strongly. A slight turn of the head, perhaps. A brief pause, then stillness again. That calm response tells you something important. Fear exists here, but it is balanced, measured. These people cannot afford constant alarm. If every sound triggered panic, there would be no rest at all. Instead, they listen. They interpret. They decide when to act and when to remain still. Researchers continue to question how finely tuned these instincts were. Without modern tools, without artificial protection, early humans relied entirely on awareness and experience. Over time, that awareness must have become deeply ingrained, almost automatic. You close your eyes for a moment just to feel the difference. Without sight, the world becomes a collection of sounds and sensations. The crackle of embers, the faint movement of someone shifting nearby, the brush of wind across your face, the distant, almost rhythmic call of something alive in the dark. It feels both peaceful and alert at the same time. When you open your eyes again, the sky seems even clearer. The stars appear sharper, more numerous. Without the bright flames, your vision adjusts, allowing you to see further into the night. You notice patterns forming, though not in the way you might recognize today. There are no familiar constellations here, no named shapes passed down through generations of recorded knowledge. Or perhaps there are patterns, but they belong to these people, not to you. Scholars remain divided on when humans first began to consistently map the stars into recognizable constellations. Some evidence suggests that even in this distant past, people may have noticed repeating patterns in the sky, using them to track seasons or guide movement. Others believe that such systems developed much later alongside more complex societies. As you lie there, it is easy to imagine both possibilities. A figure near you shifts slightly, pulling a hide more closely around their shoulders. The material looks thick, uneven, but effective. You can almost feel its texture just by watching, rough on the outside, softer on the inside where it meets the skin. Clothing here is not about style or expression. It is about survival, protection from cold, from wind, from rain. And yet there is still a quiet sense of individuality, the way a piece is tied, the way it drapes. Small differences that hint at personal preference even in such a practical world. You turn your head slightly, looking back at the fire. It is lower now, mostly embers with the occasional flicker of flame. The light it gives is softer, more diffuse. Shadows stretch longer, blending into one another until they lose their edges. This is the hour when everything begins to slow. Breathing becomes deeper. Movements become rare. Even the sounds of the night seem to settle into a steady rhythm, less varied, more predictable. You feel your own body responding to it. There is no clock telling you it is time to sleep. No alarm set for the morning. Only the gradual shift of light and temperature, the natural signals that have guided humans for far longer than any device. And you begin to understand something quietly important. This world does not rush. There are no deadlines here, no schedules to keep. Survival itself requires effort, of course, but it is spread across time in a way that feels less compressed. Tasks happen when they need to. Rest comes when it is possible. A small movement catches your attention. The person who stepped into the darkness earlier has returned, their silhouette briefly outlined against the faint glow of the embers. They move back into the group without ceremony, settling into a familiar space. No explanation is given, none is needed. You watch them for a moment, then let your gaze drift upward again. The stars remain steady, unchanged, silent witnesses to everything unfolding below. They were here long before this moment, and they will remain long after. And yet for now, they simply exist above you, distant and calm. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, then release it just as slowly. Your body sinks a little deeper into the ground, your muscles loosening without effort. The fire gives one last soft crack. A faint glow lingers, and the world continues to quiet. You wake slowly, though it does not feel like waking in the way you're used to. There is no sudden shift, no sharp return to awareness. Instead, it feels as though the world gently rises around you, light seeping back into your vision little by little. The fire beside you is almost gone now, reduced to a faint bed of ash with a few dim embers still glowing beneath the surface. The air is colder than it was before, brushing lightly across your skin, carrying the quiet freshness of early morning. You sit up, moving carefully, noticing how your body responds to the ground beneath you. It is firm, uneven, but not uncomfortable. Around you, the others are beginning to stir in small, gradual ways. A hand shifts. Someone exhales more deeply. Another person rolls slightly onto their back, blinking slowly at the pale sky above. A mainstream historical fact tells us that around 50,000 years ago, the Earth was still emerging from the last ice age, a long period when vast glaciers covered much of the northern continents. Although the climate had begun to warm in some regions, it remained unpredictable, shifting between colder and milder phases that shaped where humans could live. You feel that instability even now. The air has a sharp edge to it, not unbearable, but enough to remind you that warmth is never guaranteed. The ground holds a lingering chill, and as you press your hand against it, you notice how quickly heat seems to leave your body. You rise slowly onto your feet, stretching without thinking, your arms lifting slightly, your back loosening after the stillness of the night. The movement feels natural, unplanned, as if your body understands what it needs without instruction. Around you, the group begins to come to life. There is no single moment when everyone is awake. Instead, it happens in layers. One person stands and walks a short distance away, perhaps to check something unseen. Another crouches near the ashes, gently stirring them, searching for any remaining heat. You watch as a thin thread of smoke rises again. It is subtle at first, barely visible, then slightly stronger as a small piece of dry material is added. The fire is not gone after all, it was only resting. A quirky historical detail is that many early human groups relied on this exact technique, preserving small embers overnight so they could reignite the fire quickly in the morning. Starting from nothing each day would have required time and energy that could be better used elsewhere. You step closer, drawn once again by that familiar warmth as the flames begin to return. The fire grows slowly, carefully, never rushed. There is patience in the process, a quiet understanding of how things take shape. As the light increases, you begin to see more of the landscape around you. The horizon stretches wide and open, a mix of low grasses and scattered trees, their forms softened by a faint morning haze. In the distance, you can just make out a gentle rise in the land, perhaps a ridge or a series of low hills, their outlines pale against the brightening sky. The world feels larger in daylight. At night, everything was contained within the circle of firelight. Now the boundaries have dissolved, revealing just how much space surrounds you. It is both calming and slightly overwhelming. You take a few steps away from the group, your feet pressing into the ground, feeling the texture shift beneath you. Dry patches give way to softer soil, then back again. Each step requires attention, even if only a small amount. There are no roads here, no flattened paths carved by repeated use. Movement is guided by memory, by observation, by instinct. Historians still debate whether early humans followed consistent migration routes or moved more freely across the landscape depending on immediate conditions. Some evidence suggests regular patterns returning to familiar areas during certain seasons. Other findings point to a more flexible approach, adapting constantly to changes in climate and available resources. As you look around, it feels as though both ideas could be true. You notice faint signs on the ground, slight depressions, disturbed patches of soil, subtle traces that might indicate previous movement. To an untrained eye, they're easy to miss, but once you begin to see them, they seem to appear everywhere. Someone nearby kneels, examining the ground more closely. Their hand moves slowly over the surface, not touching at first, just hovering as if sensing rather than seeing. Then gently they press their fingers into the soil, testing its firmness, its moisture. You watch with quiet curiosity. Tracking, you realize, a skill that feels almost invisible until you see it in action. Researchers continue to question just how advanced these tracking abilities were, but there is little doubt that early humans could read signs in the environment with remarkable precision. Footprints, broken grass, slight shifts in the arrangement of stones, all of it forming a kind of language written across the land. You try to imagine reading that language yourself. At first it feels impossible, too subtle, too complex. But then you consider how much of your own world you understand without thinking. The meaning of a glance, the tone of a voice, the rhythm of a familiar place. Perhaps this is no different. The sun rises a little higher, and with it the temperature begins to shift. The cold does not disappear, but it softens. The air feels less sharp, more balanced. The group begins to move with more purpose now. One person gathers a few remaining items from near the fire. Another adjusts a piece of clothing, pulling it tighter around their shoulders. There is no spoken instruction that you can hear, no clear leader directing the moment, and yet there is a shared understanding of what comes next. Preparation, movement, continuation. You feel it in your own body as well. A subtle readiness, as if staying still for too long is no longer an option. The day is beginning, and with it the quiet demands of survival. You take one last look at the place where you spent the night, the fire now alive again, the ground marked by where bodies rested, small signs of presence that will soon fade. Wind time and movement will erase them, leaving little behind. That thought lingers with you. So much of this life leaves no trace. Scholars remain divided on how much of early human activity has simply vanished without record. Organic materials decay. Footprints disappear. Even entire camps can vanish within days or weeks, leaving behind only the faintest hints for those who come much later. You turn back toward the group. They are already beginning to move, not in a rush, but with steady intention. A direction has been chosen even if you do not know how. Perhaps it is based on memory, perhaps on signs you cannot yet see. You step forward to follow. The ground stretches ahead, open and uncertain, yet not unfamiliar to those who walk it. The sky above is clear, pale blue now, with no sign of the stars that filled it just hours before. And as you take your first steps into this new day, you feel something settle quietly within you. A sense of continuity. This life, this movement, this quiet rhythm, it has been unfolding for thousands of years before this moment. and it will continue for thousands more long after any single step has been forgotten. You walk on. You move with the group across the open land, your steps gradually falling into the same quiet rhythm as theirs. No one signals for you to follow, and yet the direction feels shared, almost instinctive. The ground stretches wide ahead, broken only by low grasses that brush softly against your legs as you walk. The morning light is gentle now, casting long pale shadows that move slowly beside you. The air still carries a trace of cold, but the sun is beginning to soften it, warming your skin in small uneven patches. As you walk, you begin to notice how carefully each step is placed. No one rushes forward, no one wastes movement. The group spreads out slightly, not in a rigid formation, but with enough space to see, to listen, to react. It feels less like walking together and more like moving as parts of a single awareness. A well-established historical understanding tells us that early human survival often depended on cooperative hunting and gathering, especially in open environments like this. Large animals could not be taken down by a single individual. It required coordination, patience, and a deep familiarity with the land. You begin to see signs of that familiarity everywhere. A figure ahead slows slightly, raising a hand just enough to catch attention. Not a command, not even a clear signal, just a subtle shift. The others respond almost immediately, their pace easing, their bodies becoming quieter. You follow their gaze. At first, you see nothing unusual. Just the same wide stretch of land, the same scattered grass, the same distant rise in the terrain. But then slowly, something begins to take shape. Movement. Far ahead, barely more than shadows against the light, a group of animals grazes. Their forms are indistinct at this distance, but you can tell they are large, their bodies moving with slow, steady confidence. You feel your own breath change, becoming quieter, more controlled. The group around you lowers slightly, their posture shifting closer to the ground. Each movement becomes deliberate, measured. Even the sound of footsteps seems to fade, absorbed by the careful placement of feet. A lesser-known detail is that many early hunting strategies relied not on speed but on endurance and persistence. Humans were capable of tracking animals over long distances, slowly exhausting them rather than confronting them directly. It was a method that required patience more than strength. You sense that patience now. No one rushes towards the animals. Instead, the group adjusts its position, spreading out just enough to influence the direction of movement without causing alarm. It is subtle, almost invisible, yet clearly intentional. You move with them, your body responding without fully understanding how. The grass brushes against your legs, dry and whispering. The ground feels firmer here, packed more tightly, offering better footing. The sun rises higher and the light grows stronger, making the distant shapes clearer. The animals lift their heads briefly. You freeze. Every muscle in your body stills your breath, held without effort. Around you the others do the same, becoming almost part of the landscape itself. For a moment nothing moves. Then slowly the animals return to grazing. You release your breath, gently, barely noticeable even to yourself. Researchers continue to question how communication worked in moments like this. Without spoken language as we understand it, or at least without clear evidence of it, coordination would have relied on gesture, posture, shared experience. It is difficult to fully reconstruct, but watching now it feels surprisingly natural. You begin to understand that much of this communication does not need words. A shift in weight, a turn of the head, the timing of a step, it is enough. The group begins to move again, slowly repositioning. The animals drift slightly, their path changing just a little, guided without force. It is not a chase, not yet, more like a quiet conversation between hunter and hunted. You notice how the land itself plays a role. Ahead, the terrain narrows slightly, the open space giving way to a more confined area bordered by low rises. It would be easier to control movement there to reduce escape paths. This is not random. Some historians suggest that early humans had a deep mental map of their surroundings, understanding not just where things were, but how they could be used. Others believe such strategies develop gradually over time, refined through repeated experience rather than deliberate planning. As you move closer, it becomes difficult to separate instinct from knowledge. Perhaps it is both. The animals begin to sense something. Their movements grow less relaxed, more alert. Heads lift more frequently. One steps away from the group, then returns. The air feels different now, charged with a quiet tension that was not there before. Your heart beats a little faster, and yet there is no panic. The group maintains its slow, steady pace, adjusting positions with careful precision. No sudden movements, no loud sounds, just gradual shaping of cease. You realize then how much control is being exercised without force. This is not about overpowering, it is about guiding. A soft sound breaks the stillness, almost like a breath pushed slightly too quickly. One of the animals reacts, stepping back, then turning. The others follow their movement, shifting more quickly now. The moment has changed. The group responds immediately, not with chaos, but with acceleration. Steps quicken, but remain controlled. The distance closes slightly, not enough to startle, but enough to maintain pressure. You move with them, your body adjusting, your pace increasing. The ground beneath you feels different now. Harder, more stable. Each step lands with quiet confidence. The air moves faster against your skin as you follow the flow of motion. The animals begin to run, not in panic, but with purpose, moving toward the narrower space ahead. The group continues to guide, to follow, to maintain that invisible boundary. You feel the rhythm of it, the balance between pushing and holding back. Some researchers believe that this kind of persistence hunting may have been one of the key advantages early humans held over other predators. Not faster in short bursts, but capable of maintaining effort over long periods, wearing down prey through endurance. As you continue forward, you begin to feel that endurance in your own body. Not exhaustion, not yet, but a steady exertion, a quiet demand that builds slowly rather than all at once. The sun climbs higher, the light bright and clear now. Shadows shorten, the air warms, the animals slow slightly. The group adjusts again, closing the distance just enough to keep pressure without forcing a sudden break. It is a delicate balance maintained through experience you can only begin to sense. Time stretches. Minutes feel longer here, each movement carrying weight, each decision unfolding slowly. And as you move within this shared rhythm, you begin to understand something deeper about this world. Survival is not a single moment. It is a process. A series of small choices, small movements repeated over and over until they become something larger. You take another step, then another. Your breath steady, your focus quiet. The land stretches ahead. The movement continues. You keep moving with the group, your breathing settling into a steady rhythm as the pace gradually slows again. The animals ahead are now further in the distance, their forms smaller, less distinct, and eventually they disappear beyond the low rise of land. No one chases after them, no one shows frustration. Instead, the group eases to a stop. There is no visible signal, no clear command, yet the decision feels shared. The moment simply arrives and everyone responds. You stand still, feeling the warmth of the sun, now resting more fully on your shoulders. The coolness of morning has mostly lifted, replaced by a dry, gentle heat that settles into your skin without discomfort. A faint breeze moves across the open land, carrying the scent of grass, and something else, something mineral, almost like stone warmed by sunlight. One of the figures kneels down. You watch closely as they reach toward the ground, brushing aside a thin layer of dust and small fragments of debris. Beneath it, something catches the light, a piece of stone shaped in a way that feels deliberate. You step closer. It's not large, not impressive at first glance, just a simple object resting quietly against the earth. But as the figure picks it up, turning it slowly in their hand, you begin to notice the edges. Sharp, defined, intentional. A widely accepted understanding in archaeology tells us that by this period humans had already developed a range of stone tools carefully shaped through a process called flint knapping. This involved striking one piece of stone against another to produce sharp flakes, each one suited for a specific purpose such as cutting, scraping, or piercing. You watch as the figure runs a thumb lightly along one edge, testing it. The movement is careful, almost respectful, as if the tool itself holds a kind of quiet importance. And perhaps it does. You kneel as well, bringing your gaze closer. The surface of the stone is uneven, marked by small ridges and lines where pieces have been chipped away. Each mark tells a story of impact, of pressure applied at just the right angle. A small, almost unnoticed detail is that skilled toolmakers could shape stones with remarkable precision, creating tools that were not only functional but consistent in form. Some patterns appear again and again across different regions, suggesting that knowledge was being shared and preserved in ways we can only partially understand. You glance at the others. Some are scanning the horizon, others are gathering small items from the ground, bits of wood, fragments of stone, anything that might be useful. There is no clear division of labour that you can see, but there is a sense of purpose in every action. The figure holding the tool begins to whir. They pick up another stone heavier rounded and position it carefully. Then, with a controlled motion, they strike the edge of the first stone. A small piece breaks away with a sharp, clean sound. You feel the sound more than you hear it. Another strike follows, then another, each one measured deliberate, producing small flakes that fall to the ground around them. The shape of the tool begins to change subtly at first, then more clearly. You find yourself drawn into the rhythm of it. Strike, pause, adjust, strike again. It is not rushed. It cannot be rushed. Too much force and the stone would shatter in the wrong way. Too little and nothing would change. The balance is precise, learned through repetition and experience. Researchers continue to question how this knowledge was passed down without written instruction. Some believe it was taught directly through observation and imitation, with younger members of the group watching and practicing over time. Others suggest that certain techniques may have been rediscovered independently in different places. As you watch now, it feels like something that lives in the body as much as the mind. The tool gradually takes on a clearer form. One edge becomes sharper, more refined. The opposite side remains thicker, easier to grip. It is simple yet effective. You imagine holding it yourself, the weight, the texture, the way it would feel in your hand as you used it to cut through meat, to scrape hides, to shape wood. It is not just an object, it is an extension of ability, a way of interacting with the world more efficiently. A quiet thought comes to you. This is a kind of language, not spoken, not written, but expressed through shape and function. A way of communicating knowledge across time without words. Scholars remain divided on how complex early human thinking was during this period. Some argue that the ability to create standardized tools suggests advanced planning and abstract thought. Others believe these behaviors could emerge from repeated practice without requiring deeper symbolic understanding. As you sit there watching the careful shaping of stone, it becomes harder to see the difference. The process feels thoughtful, intentional. You reach down and pick up one of the small flakes that fell during the shaping. It is thin, almost delicate, yet its edge is incredibly sharp. You turn it slightly, watching how the light catches along its surface. Even this fragment has value. Nothing here seems wasted. The figure finishes their work, holding the tool up briefly as if checking its balance, its shape. Then they set it aside carefully within easy reach. There is no celebration, no acknowledgement beyond the quiet completion of the task. And yet it feels significant. You stand slowly, brushing your hands against your legs, feeling the fine dust cling lightly to your skin. The ground around you is marked with small signs of activity now scattered. Flakes, disturbed soil, the faint imprint of where you have been. Soon these marks will fade. Wind will move across the land, other footsteps will cross this space. Time will pass and the traces will disappear. This thought returns to you again. How much has been lost? Entire generations of tools, of techniques, of small improvements and ideas, all carried forward only through memory and practice. When a group moves on, little remains behind. You look at the finished tool once more. It feels like a message, one that you can see but not fully read. The group begins to gather again, their movements shifting from stillness to readiness. The pause is ending. The day continues. You take one last breath of the warm, dry air, letting it settle in your chest. Then you step forward with them, leaving behind the quiet evidence of skill and intention already fading into the vast open land. You continue walking the rhythm of your steps, steady, your body settling into the quiet momentum of the group. The land stretches ahead once again, open and wide, but something feels different now. It is not in the ground beneath your feet or the air around you. It is subtler than that. It is in the people. Their movements still follow the same calm patterns, their attention still spread across the landscape, but there is a growing sense that something more is present beneath the surface. Something that is not just about survival. You notice it first in a small gesture. One of the figures slows slightly, bending to pick up a piece of stone from the ground. Not for immediate use, not to shape into a tool, but simply to hold. They turn it in their hands, studying its surface, its colour, its weight. Then they carry it with them. You find yourself wondering why. The stone does not appear sharper or stronger than others you have seen. It is not obviously more useful, and yet it has been chosen. A commonly accepted view in archaeology is that around this period humans began to display signs of symbolic thinking. Objects were no longer valued only for their direct function, but also for what they might represent or mean. This shift is often linked to what some call a cognitive revolution, a time when human behaviour appears to change in ways that are difficult to fully explain. As you walk, you begin to notice more small details below this. A piece of bone hanging from a cord, a mark scratched lightly into a surface, a pattern repeated not perfectly but clearly enough to suggest intention. These are not tools in the usual sense. They do not cut or scrape or build. They express something. You slow slightly your gaze, moving from one person to another, observing these subtle differences. No one draws attention to them. No one explains their purpose. They simply exist woven quietly into daily life. A lesser-known detail is that some of the earliest known ornaments, such as beads made from shells or animal teeth, date back tens of thousands of years. These objects were often carried or worn even though they offered no direct survival advantage. Their presence suggests a sense of identity, of belonging, or perhaps even beauty. You imagine what it must feel like to create something not strictly necessary, to take time, energy, and attention and shape it into something that serves no immediate function. It is a small act, but it carries weight. The group moves toward a slightly different kind of terrain now. The ground becomes uneven, scattered with larger stones and patches of exposed earth. Ahead you can see the dark opening of a rock formation, not quite a cave, but a sheltered space that offers shade and protection. As you approach, the air shifts. It becomes cooler, the heat of the sun fading as the stone around you absorbs the light. The sounds of the open land soften, replaced by a faint echo, a subtle change in how movement carries through space. Several members of this group move inside, say. You follow, stepping carefully over uneven ground, your hand brushing lightly against the stone wall as you pass. It feels solid, slightly rough, holding the memory of countless days and nights of heat and cold. Inside, the light dims, not completely dark, but enough that your eyes take a moment to adjust. The fire from earlier has not followed you here, so the space relies on the soft daylight filtering in from the entrance. And then you see it. On the wall, faint but unmistakable, are marks. Lines, shapes, patterns that do not belong to the natural surface of the stone. They are deliberate, placed with care. Some resemble animals, others are more abstract, difficult to interpret. You step closer, your breath slowing. This is something different. Researchers continues to question why early humans began creating cave art. Some believe it was connected to ritual or spiritual practice. Others suggest it may have been a way of sharing knowledge, recording important information about animals or the environment. There are even theories that it could have been a form of storytelling, a way of expressing experiences that could not be captured in words alone. As you stand there, it is easy to feel that these marks hold meaning, even if you cannot fully understand it. You raise your hand slightly, stopping just short of touching the surface. The lines are uneven, the pigment faded, but they carry a sense of intention that feels almost immediate. Someone stands beside you. You turn your head slightly, noticing how they look at the wall. Not with curiosity, not with confusion, but with recognition, as if what you see as mysterious is to them familiar. You wonder what they see. A story, a memory, a symbol of something shared. The thought lingers. Outside, the light continues to shift the sun, moving slowly across the sky. Inside, time feels different, slower, more contained. You sit down near the wall, your back resting lightly against the stone. The coolness seeps through your clothing, grounding you in the space. Around you, the others move quietly, some resting, some observing, some simply existing within the shelter. There is no urgency here. For a moment, survival steps back just slightly, allowing something else to take its place. A quiet awareness. Scholars remain divided on how sudden this change in human behaviour truly was. Some argue that the appearance of art and symbolic objects marks a clear turning point, a rapid shift in cognitive ability. Others believe these behaviors developed slowly over tens of thousands of years, becoming more visible only under certain conditions. As you sit there, it feels less like a sudden transformation and more like a gradual unfolding. The capacity was always there, perhaps. It simply found ways to express itself over time. You close your eyes briefly, letting the cool air and the stillness settle around you. The sounds are softer here, muted by the stone. A faint movement, a quiet breath, the distant whisper of wind outside. When you open your eyes again, the markings on the wall seem slightly different. Not because they have changed, but because your attention has. You begin to notice the repetition in certain shapes, the way lines curve and connect, the spacing between figures. It is not random, there is structure even if it's not immediately clear. This is communication, not in words, not in sentences, but in form and pattern. You think back to the tools shaped earlier, to the careful strikes of stone against stone. That too was a kind of expression, a way of shaping the world. But this feels different. This feels like shape in thought itself. You take a slow breath, the air cool and steady in your lungs. Outside the day continues. Inside something quieter unfolds. And as you sit within this sheltered space surrounded by marks left by hands long gone, you feel the distance of time in a new way. Not as something empty, but as something filled with meaning, even if much of it remains just out of reach. You remain inside the shelter for a while longer, letting your eyes wander across the stone walls, tracing the faint lines left by hands that moved here long before you arrived. The cool air settles gently around you, steady and quiet, holding the space in a kind of calm that feels separate from the open land outside. Gradually you begin to notice something else. Sound. At first it is barely there. A soft murmur, low and uneven, coming from somewhere deeper within the shelter. Not the wind, not the shifting of bodies, but something shaped, something intentional. You turn your head, slightly listening more carefully. The sound comes again, a series of tones rising and falling in a way that feels almost familiar. Not quite words as you know them, but not random either. There is structure, even if you cannot yet understand it. You shift your position, leaning forward just a little, your attention drawn toward the source. A small group sits closer to the back wall, partially in shadow. One person moves their hands as they make the sounds, subtle gestures accompanying each change in tone. The others watch their focus steady, their expressions calm. You realize then that you are listening to something like language in motion. A widely accepted scientific perspective holds that by around 50,000 years ago, humans likely possessed complex spoken language, though no direct record of those early words survives. The evidence comes from anatomy, from the structure of the vocal tract, and from the growing complexity of human behavior during this period. And yet hearing it, or something close to it, feels different from simply knowing it. The sounds are soft, measured, never rushed. Each one seems to carry weight, not just in meaning, but in presence. There is no sense of filling silence for its own sake. Instead, the sounds emerge only when needed, then fade again. You listen closely, noticing patterns. Certain tones repeat, certain rhythms return. The gestures that accompany them are not random either. A tilt of the head, a slight movement of the hand, a pause that seems to mark the end of a thought. A subtle detail that often goes unnoticed is how closely early communication may have been tied to gesture as well as sound. Even today, human conversation relies heavily on body language, and in earlier times, this connection may have been even more essential. You begin to see that connection here. The sounds alone might be difficult to interpret, but when paired with movement, with expression, with timing, they begin to form something more complete. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the moment. The person speaking pauses their gaze, moving briefly across the small group. Another responds, their voice different in tone, slightly lower, slower. The exchange continues, not rapid, not overlapping, but balanced. There is space between each part. You notice how no one interrupts. No one rushes to speak over another. The pace is unhurried, almost reflective, as if each contribution is considered before it is offered. This feels different from many modern conversations where words can come quickly, sometimes too quickly, filling space without much thought. Here silence is not something to avoid, it is part of the rhythm. Some researchers suggest that early language may have developed gradually from simpler vocalizations and gestures becoming more complex over long periods of time. Others argue that once certain cognitive thresholds were reached, language could have expanded more rapidly, transforming how humans interacted with one another. As you listen, it is easy to imagine both ideas blending together. The foundation may have been built slowly over countless generations. Then at some point something shifted, allowing expression to grow in new directions. The voices continue rising and falling gently. You begin to notice how the sounds seem to carry emotion, as well as meaning. A softer tone, a longer pause, a slight change in rhythm. These elements add layers, making the exchange feel richer than simple communication. You find yourself wondering what is being shared. Is it a memory of the hunt earlier? A description of the land beyond the hills? A story passed down from others who once stood in this same place? Perhaps all of these things. You glance toward the wall again, toward the markings left there. It occurs to you that this too might be connected. The shapes on the stone, the sounds in the air, different ways of expressing the same need. To remember, to share, to make sense of experience. A figure near the entrance shifts, letting in a slightly stronger beam of light. It stretches across the floor, illuminating small details you had not noticed before. A fragment of bone, a smooth stone placed carefully near the wall. Marks in the dust where someone has traced lines absent-mindedly. These small signs feel like echoes of thought. Another voice joined in the exchange, this one higher. Lighter, carrying a different tone. The others respond, their attention adjusting, their posture shifting slightly. There is a sense of connection here that goes beyond simple survival. You begin to feel it more clearly now. These are not just individuals sharing space, they are linked by something less visible. Something built through repeated interaction, shared understanding, and time. Scholars continue to explore how early human language shaped social bonds. Some propose that communication allowed for stronger group cohesion, making cooperation more effective. Others suggest it played a role in passing down complex knowledge, enabling each generation to build upon the last. As you sit within this quiet exchange, the idea of connection feels more immediate than theoretical. You can see it in the way one person listens while another speaks, in the subtle nod of acknowledgement, in the shared rhythm that holds the group together. You lean back slightly, letting the sounds wash over you. The cool stone at your back feels steady grounding. The air remains calm, carrying each tone clearly without distortion. Outside the world continues, but here within the shelter everything feels contained, focused. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing yourself to listen without distraction. The voices blend together, not into noise, but into a gentle pattern. Rise and fall, pause and response, a quiet flow that mirrors the rhythm of breathing, of walking, of life itself. When you open your eyes again, the light has shifted slightly. Time has passed, though it is difficult to measure how much. The exchange begins to fade, not ending abruptly but gradually as each voice grows quieter. The group settles once more into stillness, the energy of communication giving way to rest. You remain where you are, absorbing the quiet that follows. The markings on the wall, the faint traces in the dust, the lingering echo of voices, all of it feels connected now. Not separate pieces, but parts of a larger whole. A world where thought is shared not through writing, but through presence, through sound. Sound through memory. And as you sit there, surrounded by the earliest forms of expression, you begin to sense just how much of this world has slipped beyond reach, carried only in voices that have long since fallen silent. You sit in the quiet after the voices fade, noticing how the absence of sound feels just as meaningful as the sounds themselves. The shelter holds a soft stillness now, like a breath that has been released and not yet drawn again. No one rushes to fill it. After a while, one of the figures rises slowly and moves toward the entrance. The light outside has shifted brighter, now warmer, spreading across the land in a wide, pale glow. You follow with your eyes, then with your body standing and stepping carefully back into the open air. The change is immediate. The warmth of the sun touches your face and the wider world opens up again around you. The sky stretches high and clear, and the distant land feels both familiar and endlessly unknown. The group begins to gather just beyond the shelter, not tightly, but close enough to remain connected. You step among them, your gaze drifting upward, without quite knowing why. The sky feels different during the day, less mysterious perhaps, more exposed. But even now you can sense the presence of something larger, something that extends far beyond what you can see. You remember the night before? The stars, the vast silent patterns stretching across the darkness. A widely accepted understanding is that early humans were deeply aware of the sky, even long before formal astronomy existed. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, the changing positions of stars, all of these patterns would have shaped daily life, guiding movement and marking the passage of time. You imagine what it must be like to depend on those patterns without writing, without calendars, without any permanent record. Only memory, only observation. One of the figures near you tilts their head upward as well, their eyes narrowing slightly against the brightness. Their expression is calm, thoughtful. They raise a hand briefly, not pointing exactly, but indicating something in the sky. You follow the gesture. At first you see nothing unusual, just the pale blue expanse, empty and still. But then you notice the sun's position slightly higher than it was before casting light at a new angle across the ground. Shadows have shifted. The land looks different, not because it has changed, but because the light has. A small but interesting detail is that even without formal tools, early humans likely used the movement of the sun to estimate time during the day. The length and direction of shadows could provide subtle clues, helping to organize activities in a loose, natural rhythm. You glance down at your own shadow. It stretches beside you longer than it will be later, angled slightly across the ground. You move your hand, watching how it follows, dark and silent. There is something grounding about it, a quiet connection between you and the movement of the world. The group begins to move again, not toward the distant animals from before, but in a new direction. The decision is not spoken yet, it is clear. A shift in posture, a collective turn, and the motion begins. You walk with them, your steps steady. The land here changes gradually, the grass is becoming shorter, the soil more exposed. Small stones scatter across the surface, catching the light in brief flashes as you pass. The air feels drier, carrying less of the scent of vegetation and more of the subtle mineral smell of earth. As you move, you begin to notice how often people glance upward. Not constantly, not in a way that interrupts their movement, but often enough to feel intentional. A quick look, then back to the ground. Another glance, then forward again. You begin to do the same. There is no obvious object to track, no clear sign in the sky, and yet the act itself feels meaningful. Some researchers propose that early human belief systems may have been closely tied to natural cycles, especially the sky. The regular movement of celestial bodies, predictable yet distant, may have inspired early ideas about order, repetition, and even meaning beyond immediate survival. Others suggest caution in making such assumptions, pointing out that without written records, it is difficult to know how these observations were interpreted. Awareness does not always lead to symbolism. As you walk, you sense that the truth may lie somewhere between. Observation first, meaning later. A figure ahead slows slightly, crouching near the ground. You approach curious and see that they are arranging small stones in a loose pattern. Not tightly structured, not perfectly aligned, but placed with some level of intention. They pause, then adjust one stone, moving it slightly closer to another. Then they stand and continue walking, leaving the pattern behind. You linger for a moment, looking at the arrangement. It does not appear to serve a clear function. It is not a tool, not a marker you can easily interpret, and yet it feels purposeful. You step forward again, catching up with the group. The image stays with you, a simple arrangement of stones placed and then abandoned. Not forgotten perhaps, but not preserved either. Just another small trace that will eventually fade. Scholars continue to explore when humans began assigning symbolic meaning to objects and patterns. Some evidence suggests that even simple arrangements repeated over time could carry significance, whether related to memory territory or shared understanding. You wonder if that pattern meant something to the one who made it, or if it was simply an act of curiosity. The wind picks up slightly, brushing across your face, carrying a faint coolness despite the warmth of the sun. You feel it move through your hair, across your skin, a constant presence that shapes the experience of being here. The group continues forward, their pace unbroken. you begin to notice how the world feels balanced between movement and stillness. The land stretches endlessly, yet every step you take changes your position within it. The sky remains vast and unchanging, yet the light shifts moment by moment. There is a quiet awareness growing within you, a sense that everything here is connected by patterns even if those patterns are not fully understood. You take another step, then another, your breath steady. Above you, the sky remains open and clear. Below you, the ground holds faint traces of those who have passed before. And somewhere between the two, you continue moving, part of a world that is only just beginning to understand itself. You continue walking with the group, the steady rhythm of movement becoming almost automatic now. Your steps fall into place without effort, guided by the subtle cues of the people around you and the shifting texture of the ground beneath your feet. The sun has climbed higher and the warmth is more noticeable now, pressing gently against your shoulders and back. The air feels drier and the breeze that once carried coolness now feels softer, less sharp. It is the kind of warmth that does not overwhelm but settles slowly, shaping the pace of the day. After some time, the group begins to slow again. This time the change feels different. Not a response to distant animals or shifting terrain, but something quieter, more inward. The movement eases, steps shorten, and then gradually everyone comes to a stop near a shallow rise in the land. You stand still, your breath calm, your body relaxed. Around you, the others begin to gather more closely than before, though still without crowding. There is a subtle shift in attention, a quiet focus that seems to draw everyone inward. You feel it too, a sense that something is about to happen, though not in a dramatic or urgent way, more like a pause that carries meaning. A widely accepted perspective in anthropology suggests that even in very early human societies, forms of ritual or shared behavior likely existed. These could have been simple actions repeated over time, helping to strengthen social bonds or mark important moments. You begin to notice small movements. One person kneels, placing an object on the ground. Another steps forward, adjusting something near it. A third stands slightly apart, watching with a steady, focused gaze. The object itself is simple, a small collection of items, stones perhaps, a piece of bone, something that catches the light faintly, though you cannot see exactly what it is. There is no clear explanation, no spoken instruction, and yet everyone seems to understand. You lower yourself slowly, sitting among them, your attention drawn toward the center of the gathering. The ground is warm now, holding the heat of the sun, and you feel it through your hands as you steady yourself. The group remains quiet. The stillness deepens. A subtle but fascinating detail is that some of the earliest archaeological evidence of ritual behavior includes the deliberate placement of objects in specific arrangements, sometimes accompanied by repeated patterns. These findings suggest that early humans may have engaged in symbolic actions long before complex belief systems were formally developed. You watch as one of the figures reaches forward and touches the objects lightly. Not moving them, not rearranging them, just resting their hand there for a moment. Then they withdraw. Another follows, repeating the same motion. The sequence continues, each person taking a turn, each gesture nearly identical, yet slightly different in timing and pressure in presence. You feel a quiet pull to do the same. When your turn comes, you lean forward slowly, extending your hand. Your fingers hover just above the surface, hesitating for a brief moment, then gently make contact. The objects are warm, the stone smooth in places, rough in others. The bone lighter than you expect, the small reflective piece cool beneath your touch. You do not know what the action means, but it feels meaningful. You pull your hand back, returning to stillness. No one reacts, no one acknowledges the gesture. The sequence continues as if it has always been this way. Some researchers propose that early rituals may have served practical purposes as well as symbolic ones. Repeated actions could reinforce group cohesion, creating a shared sense of identity and trust. Others suggest that such behaviors may have been linked to early forms of belief, attempts to understand or influence the world in ways that were not yet fully articulated. As you sit within this quiet gathering, it becomes clear that the distinction may not matter. The act itself is enough. The wind moves softly across the land, brushing through the grass, carrying a faint sound that blends with the stillness. The sun remains steady overhead, its light constant, unchanging. Time feels suspended. No one rushes to end the moment. No one seems concerned with what comes next. The gathering simply exists, held together by shared attention. You begin to notice the expressions of those around you. Calm, focused, not distant but present in a way that feels deeper than usual movement or conversation. There is a sense of connection that does not rely on words. You realize that this may be one of the earliest forms of something you recognize. Not exactly ceremony as you understand it, not defined or structured in a formal way, but something close. A shared pause repeated often enough to carry meaning. A quiet acknowledgement of something beyond immediate need. Scholars continue to examine whether such early rituals were connected to ideas about life, death, or the natural world, or if they were simply expressions of social bonding. Without written records, much remains uncertain, and interpretations vary widely. You sit with that uncertainty. It does not feel frustrating. It feels fitting. The group slowly begins to shift again. Not abruptly, not all at once, but gradually. One person stands, another follows. The objects remain where they were placed undisturbed. The moment has passed. You rise as well, brushing your hands lightly against your legs, feeling the warmth of the ground give way to the air once more. As you step back, you glance at the small arrangement one last time. It looks simple again, almost ordinary, and yet you know it is not. The group begins to move their direction, changing slightly their pace, returning to its steady rhythm. You fall in step, your mind still holding the quiet weight of what you just experienced. There is something about these small repeated actions, something that lingers, not because you fully understand them, but because you felt them. You walk on the land, stretching ahead the sky wide above, and somewhere behind you a small arrangement of objects remains holding meaning that may never be fully known. You leave the quiet gathering behind your steps, returning to the steady rhythm of the group as the land stretches out once more. The air feels warmer now, carrying a faint dryness that settles lightly on your skin. The sun stands higher, its light more direct, softening the edges of distant shapes and flattening shadows across the ground. The terrain begins to change again. At first it is subtle. The grasses thin out, the soil becomes more compact, and the scattered stones underfoot grow larger, more frequent. Then gradually the land opens into something wider, smoother, almost like a natural corridor guiding your movement forward. You follow without question. There is a quiet sense that this path is known not in the way a road is known, but through repetition, through memory carried in bodies rather than maps. A widely supported idea in prehistoric studies is that early humans travelled across vast regions using routes shaped by the geography, water sources, and seasonal patterns. These paths were not permanent structures, but they were remembered, revisited, and passed on through generations. As you walk, you begin to feel that memory around you. The group moves with confidence here. Their steps are slightly quicker, their attention less scattered. There is familiarity in the way they navigate the land, as if they have passed through this place before, perhaps many times. The ground beneath your feet is firmer now, easier to cross. You notice faint depressions in the soil, barely visible, yet repeated just enough to suggest previous movement. Not a clear trail, but something close. You glance to the side and notice a shift in the landscape. The earth drops away slightly, revealing a shallow slope that leads down toward what looks like a narrow stretch of water. It is not wide, not deep, but enough to reflect the sky in a thin, shimmering line. The group begins to angle toward it. You follow your pace, adjusting as the ground slopes downward. The soil here feels looser, small particles shifting under your feet. You move carefully, maintaining balance without breaking the steady flow. As you approach, the sound becomes clearer. A faint continuous movement, water passing over the stone. It is gentle sound, almost soothing, blending with the soft wind and the distant calls of unseen animals. You step closer to the edge and look down. The water is clear, moving slowly, its surface broken by small ripples where it flows around rocks. The light catches it in brief flashes, creating patterns that shift and fade with each movement. A lesser-known observation is that access to fresh water was one of the most important factors influencing early human movement. Groups often return to the same water sources repeatedly, not only for drinking, but also for the plants and animals that gathered nearby. You can see that importance here. The group spreads out slightly along the edge, some kneeling to drink, others scanning the surroundings. One person cups their hands, lifting water carefully to their mouth. Another steps a little further along, watching the flow as if searching for something. You kneel as well, lowering your hand into the stream. The water is cool, almost startling at first, then refreshing. You bring it to your lips, tasting its simplicity. No added flavour, no treatment, just the clean, direct sensation of something essential. You take another slow sip. The act feels grounding. As you remain there, you notice how the area around the water carries more signs of life. Small tracks press into the damp soil, overlapping in patterns that are difficult to separate. Some are narrow and pointed, others wider, deeper. You look closer, your eyes tracing the shapes. Tracking here feels easier, somehow. The ground holds the impressions more clearly, preserving details that would be lost on drier surfaces. Researchers continue to explore how early humans used such natural features to read the environment. Water sources not only provided resources, but also concentrated information revealing the presence of animals, the direction of movement, even the timing of activity. You imagine how much could be learned from a single patch of ground. The group does not linger too long. Once they have drunk and observed, they begin to gather again. The pause is brief, purposeful. Water is essential, but movement must continue. You rise, brushing your hands lightly against your legs, feeling the dampnesses fade as the air dries your skin. As you step away from the stream, you glance back. The surface continues to move unchanged by your presence. The tracks remain, but already they begin to soften as the edges blur under the shifting flow of water and the gentle pressure of the breeze. Another trace that will not last. The group moves upward, again leaving the slope behind and returning to the open ground. The corridor of land continues ahead, guiding your direction without forcing it. You notice something else now. The horizon feels closer. Not because the land has changed dramatically, but because your sense of distance has shifted. You've been walking for some time, crossing space in a way that feels both slow and continuous. Time and distance blend together here. There are no markers to measure progress, no clear beginning or end, only the steady repetition of steps and the gradual change of surroundings. Some scholars suggest that early humans may have experienced time differently, not as a fixed sequence of hours, but as a flow tied to movement, light, and need. Without clocks or written records, time would be felt rather than counted. As you walk, that idea begins to make sense. The morning has passed into something closer to midday, though you do not measure it in numbers. You feel it in the warmth of the sun, in the position of shadows, and the quiet shift of energy within your body. The group continues forward. Their pace remains steady, their movements efficient. There is no hesitation, no uncertainty that you can see. The path, though invisible, feels certain. You follow your steps, matching theirs. The land stretches ahead, familiar and unknown at the same time. Each step reveals something new, even as it repeats what has come before. And somewhere beneath all of it, there is a sense of continuity, of paths walked many times, of knowledge carried without words, of a world that moves forward one quiet step at a time. You continue along the narrow stretch of land, the memory of water fading behind you as the ground becomes dry once again. The warmth of the day settles more fully now, pressing gently against your skin, slowing your movements just slightly, without stopping them. The group remains steady, but something in their attention begins to shift. It is subtle at first. A few glances exchanged, a longer pause before stepping forward. A quiet tightening in posture as if something unseen has entered their awareness. You feel it too, though you do not yet know why. The land ahead looks unchanged, open, scattered with low grasses and occasional stones. The horizon remains wide and uninterrupted, and yet there is a sense that this space holds something more than it did before. One of the figures slows and lowers their body slightly, their gaze fixed on the ground. You follow their line of sight. At first, the marks seem familiar. Tracks pressed into the soil similar to those you saw near the water. But as you look closer, you begin to notice differences. The shape is not quite right. The spacing between impressions is uneven in a way that feels distinct. The depth varies more sharply, as if weight shifted unpredictably with each step. You kneel down, studying the pattern. There is intention here, not just movement, but movement guided by awareness. A widely accepted scientific understanding confirms that during this period modern humans were not alone on the Earth. Other human species, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, existed. Alongside them, sometimes in the same regions, sometimes separated by distance. You look again at the tracks. They could belong to animals, they could belong to others like you, or they could belong to something closer yet different. A small intriguing detail is that genetic evidence shows that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred at certain points in history, meaning their interactions were not always hostile. Some encounters may have been peaceful or at least complex in ways that are difficult to fully reconstruct. You feel a quiet tension settle into your body. Not fear exactly, awareness. The group responds without sudden movement. No one speaks, no one gestures broadly, instead they adjust. Positions shift slightly, attention narrows. Each person seems to take in the surroundings with greater care. You rise slowly, your movements controlled. The wind brushes across the land, carrying faint scents that are difficult to separate. Dry grass, warm soil, something else distant and uncertain. You listen. The usual sounds remain. The soft movement of air, the faint rustle of plants, no clear sign of anything approaching. And yet the feeling remains. Researchers continue to question how often early human species interacted directly. Some theories suggest frequent encounters, especially in regions where their territories overlapped. Others propose that such meetings were rare, separated by time and distance. As you stand there, it becomes clear how easily such moments could pass without leaving a trace. A crossing of paths, a brief awareness, then nothing. One of the figures steps forward cautiously, following the line of tracks. Not quickly, not in pursuit, but in observation. The rest of the group follows at a slight distance, maintaining space while staying connected. You move with them. The ground shifts subtly under your feet, the soil becoming slightly softer in places, then firm again. The tracks continue, then fade, then reappear as if the path itself resists being fully known. You focus your attention, trying to see what they see. A deeper impression here. A broken blade of grass there. A small stone turned from its original position. Each detail adds to the picture, though the full shape remains incomplete. Scholars remain divided on how distinct different human species would have appeared to one another. Some suggest that the differences were obvious in build and facial structure and movement. Others believe the distinctions may have been less striking at a distance, especially in low light or from afar. You imagine seeing another figure across this land. Would you recognize them as different, or would they seem almost familiar, just slightly altered in ways that are difficult to define? The group slows again. The tracks begin to scatter, becoming less clear, less consistent. The ground here is harder, offering fewer impression. Whatever passed through this area left only partial signs. Eventually the trail disappears. No clear direction, no continuation, just open land once more. The group pauses. There is no visible frustration. No attempt to force an answer where none exists. Instead, there is acceptance. The understanding that not everything can be followed, not every question resolved. You feel that acceptance within you. The tension eases, though the awareness remains. The land stretches ahead unchanged, and yet you know now that it is not empty. Others have passed here. Others may pass again. The thought lingers quietly, a small reminder of how wide this world is and how little of it is fully known. Some researchers propose that the presence of other human species may have influenced behavior in subtle ways, shaping movement patterns, group size, even social structures. Others argue that environmental factors played a much larger role, with interactions between species being only one part of a much broader picture. As you begin to move again, it feels impossible to separate these influences. The world is complex, layered, filled with unseen connections. You walk forward, your steps steady, your senses more alert now. The group resumes its rhythm, the moment of tension fading into the background. But something has changed, even if only slightly. You are no longer moving through an empty landscape, you are moving through a shared one. And somewhere beyond your sight, beyond your understanding, others may be walking their own paths, leaving behind traces just as faint, just as temporary. You continue on the ground, stretching beneath you the sky wide above, and the sense of presence once noticed never fully disappears. You continue forward with the group, the faint tension from before settling into something quieter, something that does not disappear but becomes part of the background of your awareness. Your steps remain steady, your breathing calm, yet you find yourself listening more carefully now. The land stretches out ahead in gentle rises and dips the surface uneven but familiar. The grasses here are shorter, more sparse, allowing the ground beneath to show through in patches of pale soil and scattered stones. The air carries a dry warmth softened slightly by a steady breeze that moves across the open space. You notice how the group maintains a slightly tighter formation than before. Not crowded, not rigid, but closer. Each person remains within easy sight of the others. Movements are still calm, but there is a quiet coordination that feels more deliberate now. It is as if everyone is aware of the same possibility, even if it has not been spoken. You glance toward the horizon. Nothing moves there. No visible figures, no sudden shifts, and yet the idea of others remains just beyond what you can see. A well-supported understanding in human evolution is that encounters between different groups, whether of the same species or not, could vary widely. Some may have involved avoidance, others cautious observation, and in certain cases direct interaction. The outcomes likely depended on many factors, including resources, territory, and group size. As you walk, you begin to imagine what such an encounter might feel like. Not dramatic, not sudden, but slow, measured. Like everything else in this world, the ground slopes slightly upward, leading you toward a low ridge. The group approaches it without hesitation, though their pace slows just enough to suggest increased attention. You follow your steps careful, your gaze shifting between the ground and the space ahead. When you reach the top, the view opens. On the other side, the land dips into a shallow basin where patches of vegetation grow more densely. Small clusters of shrubs and taller grasses break the uniformity of the plain, creating areas of shadow and cover. And there, near the far edge of the basin, you see movement. It is distant, subtle, but unmistakable. A group, not animals, figures. You remain still, your body responding before your thoughts fully form. The others stop as well. No one moves forward. Yes, no one retreats. The distance between the two groups is wide enough to feel safe, yet close enough that presence is undeniable. You cannot see details clearly, only shapes motion the way they stand and shift against the land. A lesser-known detail is that some archaeological sites suggest that different human groups may have occupied the same regions at different times, sometimes leaving behind overlapping layers of tools and remains. This hints at a world where paths crossed, even if briefly. You are watching one of those moments. The figures across the basin pause as well. There is a stillness that settles over the space between you, not empty but filled with awareness. Both groups remain at distance, observing without approaching. You feel your heartbeat steady but present. There is no immediate threat, no sudden movement that suggests danger. And yet the moment carries weight. Researchers continue to examine how such encounters may have unfolded. Some theories suggest that early humans avoided direct contact when possible, minimizing risk. Others propose that curiosity and necessity could lead to cautious approach, especially in areas rich with resources. As you stand there, you sense both possibilities. The group around you does not advance. Instead, they shift slightly, adjusting their positions in a way that keeps the other group in view while maintaining space. It is a careful balance, neither retreating nor confronting. You watch the distant figures more closely. Their posture looks similar, though not identical. The way they stand, the way they move, it feels both familiar and different at the same time. Slight variations in build, perhaps, or in how they hold themselves. It's difficult to be certain from this distance. Scholars remain divided on how easily early humans could distinguish between different species at a glance. Some differences would have been visible, but others may have been subtle, especially without close contact. You feel that uncertainty now. They could be like you. Or not. The wind moves across the basin, carrying no clear sound from the other side. The distance is too great for voices to reach you if voices are being used at all. Time stretches. No one rushes, no one forces a decision. After a while, one of the figures across the basin shifts, turning slightly, their body angling away from your direction. Another follows, then another. The group begins to move, not quickly, not in retreat, but in quiet continuation of their own path. You watch as they drifted along the edge of the basin, their forms gradually becoming less distinct. The group around you does not follow. They remain where they are, observing, until the distant figures fade into the landscape, their presence dissolving into the same vastness from which it emerged. The moment passes. You feel it not as an ending, but as a soft release of tension. The space between the two groups returns to stillness. Some researchers suggest that such encounters, even without direct interaction, could influence behavior. The knowledge that others exist nearby might shape movement, encourage caution, or alter patterns of resource use. As you stand there, it is easy to imagine how such awareness would linger. The group begins to move again. This time the direction shifts slightly, angling away from the basin. Not dramatically, but enough to create distance. It is a choice made without words, yet understood by all. You follow. The land stretches out once more, the basin falling behind you, the ridge fading into memory. The air feels the same, the ground unchanged, yet your sense of the world has shifted. You are not alone here. You never were. You take a slow breath, letting the warm air settle in your lungs. Then you continue forward, your steps steady, your awareness widened, moving through a landscape that holds more stories than it will ever reveal. You move away from the basin, the memory of the distant figures settling quietly behind you. The group resumes its steady pace, but something has changed. It is not visible in their movements, not obvious in their direction, yet you can feel it in the way attention lingers a little longer on the horizon, in the way each step feels just slightly more deliberate. The land stretches out once again wide and open, yet it no longer feels empty. You walk with that awareness, your senses gently expanded, taking in more than just the ground beneath your feet. The breeze shifts across your face, carrying faint scents that seem harder to separate now. The sky remains clear, but you find yourself glancing outward more often, as if expecting something to emerge. After some time, the terrain begins to soften. The ground dips slightly, forming a shallow hollow, where the soil appears darker and more compact. Small clusters of plants grow here, denser than before, their leaves catching the light in subtle variations of green and grey. The group slows. This time the change is not about caution or distance. It is about recognition. You feel it as you step into the hollow. The ground here is different, slightly cooler, slightly more stable. There is a sense that this place has been used before, though not in any obvious way. No structures remain, no lasting markers stand, and yet the space feels familiar to them. A broadly accepted idea in archaeology is that early human groups often returned to the same locations repeatedly, especially places that offered reliable resources or shelter. These sites might not leave permanent traces, but subtle signs could remain for those who knew how to read them. You begin to look more carefully. At first, you see only scattered stones and patches of disturbed soil, but then slowly patterns begin to emerge. A grouping of stones that feels slightly too organized. A section of ground that appears more compacted than the rest. A faint discoloration in the soil, as if something once burned there. You kneel, touching the ground lightly. It is firm, pressed down by repeated use. A small but intriguing detail is that many prehistoric camps leave behind only the faintest evidence, often just slight changes in soil composition or the arrangement of materials. Over time, wind and weather erase most visible traces, making these places difficult to identify without careful study. You can feel that erasure happening even now. The group spreads out within the hollow, each person moving with quiet purpose. Some kneel examining the ground. Others gather small pieces of wood or stone. There is no need for discussion. The actions seem guided by the memory, by familiarity carried within the body. You rise slowly, watching. One of the figures begins to clear a small space, brushing aside loose debris with careful repeated motions. Another collects a few stones and places them in a loose circle. The arrangement is simple but intentional. You recognize it. A place for fire, not yet lit but prepared. You feel a quiet sense of continuity. This space has held fire before, perhaps many times. The exact moments are gone, the people who once sat here long since moved on, but the pattern remains. You step closer, drawn by that sense of repetition. The ground around the forming circle shows subtle signs of past heat, slight discoloration, a texture that feels different beneath your fingers. It is not obvious unless you look for it, but once you notice it becomes clear. This place remembers, even if only faintly. Some researchers suggest that repeated use of certain sites may have contributed to the development of early social patterns, creating shared spaces that held meaning beyond immediate survival. Others argue that such reuse was purely practical based on location and resources, rather than any deeper significance. As you stand there, it feels like both could be true. Practical, yes, but also something more. The group continues preparing the space. Dry materials are gathered, small sticks, fragments of plant matter, anything that will catch easily. Larger pieces are placed nearby, ready to feed the fire once it begins. The process is familiar now. You have seen it before, though each time carries its own quiet variation. You notice how the movements are efficient but not rushed. There is no urgency, only a steady progression of steps, each one leading naturally to the next. You find yourself wondering how many times this has happened here. How many evenings have settled into this same hollow? How many mornings have begun with the slow rekindling of warmth? The thought stretches beyond what you can fully imagine, generations perhaps. Scholars continue to explore how long such sites may have been used, though precise timelines are difficult to determine. Without durable structures, the evidence often blends together, layers overlapping in ways that are hard to separate. You sit down near the edge of the clearing, watching as the preparations near completion. The circle of stones is set. The materials are in place, the space is ready. And yet there is a pause. No one lights the fire immediately. The group settles first, their bodies easing into positions around the prepared area. Some sit, others remain standing for a moment longer, scanning the surroundings before joining. It is as if the place itself must be acknowledged before it is used. You lower yourself to the ground once more, feeling the firm surface beneath you, slightly warmer than the surrounding land. The air begins to shift again, the heat of the day slowly softening as time moves forward. The hollow holds the warmth differently. It feels more contained, more stable. You look around at the subtle signs of past presence, the barely visible traces that would go unnoticed by most, and you realize something quietly important. This is how memory lives here, not in writing, not in permanent structures, but in repeated actions, in familiar places, in patterns that continue long after the original moment has passed. The fire will be lit again, the group will gather again, and then they will move on, leaving behind only the faintest impression of what happened here. You sit with that thought, letting it settle. The land stretches outward beyond the hollow, wide and open as ever. But within this small space something lingers, a sense of return, a quiet echo of all the moments that came before. You remain seated at the edge of the hollow, watching as the final pieces of dry material are placed within the circle of stones. The air has shifted again, the warmth of midday beginning to soften into something gentler, something that hints at the slow approach of evening. The light feels different now. It is still bright, but less direct, stretching across the land in longer angles, touching the ground in a way that reveals more texture, more depth. Shadows begin to form again, faint at first, then gradually more defined. One of the figures leans forward. You recognize the motion immediately. A small ember, carefully preserved, is brought into the center. It is barely visible at first, just a faint glow nestled within a piece of charred material. But as it touches the prepared bundle, something changes. A thin thread of smoke rises. You lean slightly closer, your attention drawn to the delicate transformation. The ember is not a flame yet, not something strong or certain. It is fragile, dependent on careful movement, on patience. The person tending it breathes gently, directing a soft stream of air toward the center. The smoke thickens. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, a small flame appears. It flickers once, twice, then steadies. A well-established understanding in human history is that the ability to control fire not just created it, but maintain and transport it, was one of the most significant developments in human evolution. It allowed for warmth, protection, and the cooking of food, all of which supported survival in ways that reshaped daily life. You watch that truth unfold in front of you. The flame grows, fed carefully with small pieces of dry material. It spreads gradually, never rushed, building strength with each addition. The person tending it remains focused, adjusting their movements with quiet precision. Others begin to gather closer. The circle forms again, not as a strict arrangement, but as a natural pattern. Each person finds a place settling into a distance that allows for both warmth and space. You move closer as well, feeling the first gentle wave of heat reach your skin. It is subtle at first, almost easy to miss, but it grows steadily as the fire strengthens. A lesser known tale is that fire not only provided warmth and protection, but also extended the day. With light available after sunset early, humans could continue activities, share knowledge, and strengthen social bonds in ways that were not possible in complete darkness. You begin to sense that extension already. The fire creates a space that feels separate from the rest of the world. Beyond it, the land continues vast and open. But within the circle of light, everything feels closer, more focused. The flame rises higher now, its movement steady, its glow soft but consistent. Shadows form and shift across the ground, across faces, across the nearby stone. You watch how the light changes everything. Details that were hidden before now appear. Textures become clearer, movements gain definition. Even the air itself seems to take on a different quality, filled with the faint scent of smoke and warmth. You breathe it in slowly. The smell is familiar, grounding. It carries something deeper than comfort. Connection. One of the figures places a larger piece of wood onto the fire. It catches slowly, the edges darkening, then glowing, then giving way to flame. The sound of burning wood returns soft and rhythmic, a quiet crackling that blends with the surrounding stillness. You find yourself listening to it. Each small sound feels distinct yet part of a larger pattern. Some researchers suggest that the presence of fire may have played a role in the development of social interaction, providing a central point where groups could gather, share experiences, and communicate more effectively. Others propose that its influence extended even further, possibly shaping aspects of human cognition over time. As you sit within its glow, the idea feels natural. The fire draws attention inward. It slows movement. It creates a shared space that feels both practical and meaningful. The group settles more fully now. Bodies relax, movements become less frequent. The urgency of the day fades, replaced by a quieter rhythm. You notice how the light flickers across the faces around you, revealing subtle expressions that are easy to miss in brighter conditions. Eyes reflect the glow. Features soften and sharpen in alternating patterns. It is a different kind of seeing. More focused, more attentive. You shift slightly, adjusting your position to feel the warmth more evenly. The ground beneath you holds a gentle heat, now absorbing and reflecting the fire's presence. You place your hands closer to the flames, feeling the temperature rise against your skin. It is not overwhelming. Just enough! You look up briefly. The sky is beginning to change. The bright blue has softened into something paler. The edges of the horizon warming with faint hints of colour. The day is moving toward its end, though slowly without any sharp boundary. The fire continues to burn steadily. You begin to notice small actions unfolding around you. One person adjusts their clothing, pulling it closer as the air cools. Another shifts position, leaning slightly forward to catch more warmth. A third picks up a piece of wood, turning it in their hands before placing it carefully into the flames. Each action is simple, but together they form a pattern, a quiet routine that repeats across evenings, across seasons, across years. Scholars remain divided on how early such routines became structured traditions. Some believe that repeated behaviours around fire gradually formed the basis of cultural practices. Others suggest that while patterns existed, they may not have held the same symbolic meaning we assign to them today. As you sit there, it feels less important to define the boundary. What matters is the experience, the warmth, the shared presence, the slow fading of the day. You lean back slightly, your gaze drifting between the fire and the changing sky. The light continues to soften the shadows, lengthening the air, cooling just enough to make the fire feel more essential. The group remains quiet, not silent but calm, the kind of calm that settles naturally without effort. You feel your own body responding to it. Your breathing slows, your thoughts quiet. The fire burns steadily in front of you, its glow constant, its warmth reassuring. And as the day gently gives way to evening, you realize that this moment, simple as it is, holds something that has been repeated for thousands of years. A return to warmth, a return to light, a return to one another. You sit close to the fire as the light continues to fade from the sky, the warmth steady against your hands, your face, your chest. The air has cooled enough now that you can feel the difference clearly. Without the fire, the evening would already carry a quiet chill. The group remains gathered, their movements slower, their attention drawn inward. The land beyond the circle of light fades into shadow, becoming less detailed, less certain. What was once visible now softens into suggestion, and then your gaze shifts. Someone rises. They move towards a nearby rock surface, not as deep or enclosed as the shelter from earlier, but still marked by stone exposed to time. The firelight reaches it faintly just enough to reveal texture uneven and rough. You watch as the figure pauses, then reaches down to the ground. They pick up something small. When they turn back toward the rock, you see it more clearly, a piece of pigment. Dark, almost black with a slight red tone when the firelight touches it. You lean forward slightly. The figure lifts their hand and begins to move it across the stone. At first, the motion seems simple, almost tentative. A line appears uneven, slightly curved. Then another follows, crossing it at an angle. The marks are not random. They build on one another, forming something that begins to take shape. A generally accepted view in archaeology is that by this time humans were creating cave and rock art in various parts of the world using natural pigments like charcoal and ochre. These materials were often applied by hand or with simple tools, leaving behind images that have lasted for tens of thousands of years. You are watching that process unfold. The figure continues their movements, growing more confident. The lines become more defined. A shape begins to emerge, something that resembles an animal. Not perfectly, not in detail, but clearly enough to be recognized. You feel a quiet sense of focus settle over the group. Others turn their attention toward the wall. Some lean slightly forward. Others remain still, watching without movement. No one interrupts. No one speaks. A small but fascinating detail is that some early artwork show signs of layering with multiple images drawn over time. This suggests that the act of marking the wall was repeated, revisited, perhaps even shared across generations. You wonder if this place has held such marks before. If others have stood here in similar light making similar gestures. The figure pauses, then adds another line, refining the shape. The animal becomes clearer now. The curve of a back, the suggestion of legs, a head lowered as if grazing or moving slowly. It is simple, and yet it carries presence. You find yourself imagining movement within the still image. The way the animal might walk, the way it might breathe, the sound it might make in the distance. The lines are enough to bring those thoughts forward. You realize then that this is more than drawing. It is remembering. Some researchers suggest that early art may have been connected to memory, a way of preserving experiences or observations. Others propose that it could have held symbolic meaning, perhaps related to hunting belief or identity. There is no single answer, but as you watch it feels clear that something important is happening. The figure steps back slightly, looking at what they have made. The firelight flickers across the lines, making them seem to move to shift as the shadows dance across the surface. You notice how the image changes depending on the light, sometimes more visible, sometimes less. Almost alive in its own quiet way. You glance at the others. Their attention remains steady, but their expressions are difficult to read. Not distant, not intense, but focused in a way that suggests recognition, as if they understand what is being shown. As if the image speaks to something they already know. Scholars remain divided on whether such early art was intended for communication within the group or for something beyond it. Some argue that these images may have held shared meaning easily understood by those who created them. Others suggest that their purpose may have been more personal, less structured. You sit with that uncertainty. It does not feel like a problem to solve. It feels like part of the experience. The figure returns to the wall, adding a few final touches. Small lines, subtle adjustments. Then they lower their hand, the movement complete. The image remains, simple, quiet, steady against the stone. You feel a shift in the atmosphere. Not dramatic, not sudden, but noticeable. The act has ended, and something has been left behind. A mark that will remain longer than the fire, longer than the moment, perhaps longer than the memory of those who made it. You look at the wall again, at the lines, the shape, the presence held within them, and you think about how rare this is in this world. So much disappears, so much fades, but this, if undisturbed, might remain, a trace carried forward through time. The fire crackles softly beside you, its light continuing to move across the surface, animating the image in shifting patterns. You feel the warmth against your skin, the coolness of the air behind you, the steady rhythm of your breath. The group begins to settle again. Some shift their positions, others lean back their attention, slowly drifting away from the wall and back toward the fire. The moment passes, but the image remains. You lower your gaze slightly, letting the scene settle within you. The fire, the stone, the lines, all part of a world that is beginning to express itself in ways that go beyond immediate need. You sit quietly watching the light flicker. The shadows move the image, hold its place, and you begin to understand just a little more how thought itself is finding form. You remain by the fire as the newly drawn image settles into the quiet of the evening. The lines on the stone wall no longer change, yet they continue to hold your attention as if something within them is still unfolding. The light flickers, and with each movement of the flame the image seems to shift slightly, the animal's shape gaining a sense of motion that is not truly there. Gradually your focus drifts, not away from the wall entirely, but outward toward the subtle sounds returning to the space. The crackle of the fire, the soft movement of bodies adjusting against the ground, the faint breath of wind brushing past the opening of the hollow. And then something new, a rhythm. At first it is barely noticeable. A soft repeated sound, almost like a distant heartbeat. You turn your head slightly, listening more closely. It comes from one of the figures seated near the fire. They hold something in their hands. A piece of wood, perhaps, or bone. They tap it gently against another object, creating a steady pattern. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to be heard within the circle of warmth. Tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm is simple, but it continues. You feel it more than you hear it. Another person begins to move slightly, their hand brushing against their leg in time with the sound. A third shifts their position, their breathing aligning with the pattern without conscious effort. The rhythm spreads, not through instruction but through presence. A widely supported understanding in human history is that music, or at least rhythmic sound, likely played a role in early human life long before formal instruments were developed. Evidence from ancient bone flutes and other simple tools suggests that humans were creating sound for purposes beyond immediate survival. You listen as the pattern grows more defined. The tapping becomes steadier, more confident. Another sound joins it, softer, created by hands moving against surfaces, adding layers without overwhelming the original beat. It is not complex, but it is shared. A lesser-known detail is that some of the earliest known musical instruments date back over 40,000 years, including flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory. These instruments required careful shaping, suggesting that sound was valued enough to dedicate time and skill to its creation. You imagine the effort behind such objects, the shaping, the testing, the listening, all for something that cannot be held once it fades. You glance around the group. Their expressions remain calm, but their attention has shifted. Some watch the person creating the rhythm. Others close their eyes briefly as if feeling the pattern more than observing it. You notice how the firelight moves with the sound, not literally, but in the way your perception connects the two. The flicker of flame seems to align with the beat, creating a sense of unity within the space. You find your own breathing adjusting, slower, more regular. The rhythm guides it without effort. Some researchers propose that early music may have played a role in strengthening social bonds, creating a shared experience that brings individuals into alignment. Others suggest it may have been connected to ritual communication or even the regulation of emotion. As you sit within this quiet pattern, all of these ideas feel possible. The rhythm continues, not growing louder, not becoming more complex, but deepening in its presence. It fills the space gently without overwhelming it. You begin to notice small variations, a slightly longer pause, a softer strike, a brief shift in tempo that returns to its original pace. These changes are subtle, but they add texture, making the pattern feel alive. You watch the hands that create it. The movements are relaxed, unforced. There is no sign of strain, no urgency to maintain perfection. The rhythm flows naturally, adapting in small ways without losing its core. You realize that this too is a form of expression, not through shape or line, but through sound. Scholars continue to explore how early humans may have used rhythm and music in their daily lives. Some theories suggest that these sounds could have helped coordinate group activities such as walking or working together. Others propose that music may have served as a form of storytelling, carrying meaning through tone and pattern rather than words. You listen more closely, wondering if there is meaning here, if the rhythm tells a story, or if it simply exists, offering something that does not need to be explained. The fire burns steadily beside you, its warmth constant. The image on the wall remains its lines unchanged. The rhythm continues. All three elements seem to connect, forming a space that feels complete in a way that is difficult to define. You shift slightly, settling more comfortably against the ground. The air has cooled further now, making the fire's warmth more noticeable. The contrast between heat and coolness sharpens your awareness, grounding you in the moment. You glance upward. The sky has darkened, the first stars beginning to appear. They are faint at first, barely visible, but growing clearer as the light fades. The rhythm continues beneath them, steady, unhurried. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound carry through you. It feels calming, balancing. When you open them again, the group remains as it was. No one has left. No one has interrupted. The pattern holds. Researchers remain divided on whether early music was primarily functional or expressive. Some argue that it served clear purposes related to survival and coordination. Others believe it may have emerged simply because humans are drawn to rhythm and sound, finding meaning in patterns even when no direct function exists. As you sit within the gentle pulse of the evening, the distinction feels less important.
The experience itself is enough.
The rhythm gradually begins to soften, not ending abruptly but fading slowly, each strike spaced further apart, each pause growing longer. Eventually it stops. The silence that follows feels full, not empty. You remain still, listening to what is no longer there. The fire crackles softly. The night deepens. The image on the wall holds its quiet form, and within you the rhythm lingers, a faint echo that continues even after the sound is gone. You remain seated as the last trace of rhythm fades into the quiet night, noticing how the stillness that follows feels different now. It is not empty. It carries something that lingers, something shaped by what just passed. The fire continues to burn softly, its light steady, its warmth reaching outward in gentle waves. Around you the group settles further into rest. Movements become smaller, slower. The day has fully given way to night. You tilt your head slightly, looking toward the sky. More stars have appeared, now scattered across the darkness in inner patterns that feel both random and ordered at the same time. Without the brightness of day, they reveal themselves fully, each point of light steady and clear. You find yourself watching them for longer than before. There is a quiet pull to it. A widely recognized observation in the study of early humans is that awareness of natural cycles, especially the movement of the sun and moon, would have played a crucial role in daily life. These patterns offered a sense of consistency in a world that could otherwise feel unpredictable. You begin to sense that consistency now. The stars do not rush. They do not flicker in and out. They remain. One of the figures near you shifts slightly, turning their gaze upward as well. Their faces calm, illuminated faintly by the firelight. They watch the sky without speaking, without gesture, simply observing. You wonder what they see. Not just the lights themselves, but what those lights might mean. A subtle but fascinating detail is that some of the earliest known markings on bone and stone may represent attempts to track time possibly related to lunar cycles. Small notches repeated in sequences have been interpreted by some researchers as early forms of counting or recording. You think about that as you watch the sky. Okay. The idea of time taking shape not through numbers or clocks, but through observation and repetition. The moon, though not yet visible above the horizon, has already left its mark on the rhythm of life. Its phases, its gradual changes would have been noticed even if not fully understood. You shift your position slightly, lying back on the ground once more. The earth beneath you feels cooler now, the warmth from the day fading. You can feel the difference clearly, the contrast between the ground and the heat of the fire just a short distance away. You place your hands behind your head, letting your gaze rest fully on the sky. The stars seem brighter from this angle, more numerous. You begin to notice patterns even if you do not assign names to them. Clusters of light that form loose shapes. Lines that seem to connect, even if only in your perception. Some researchers suggest that the human tendency to recognize patterns may have influenced how early people interpreted the night sky, gradually leading to the creation of constellations and stories. Others caution that such interpretations may have developed much later as societies became more complex. As you lie there, it feels natural to look for patterns, not because you have been taught to, but because your mind seems drawn to it. You trace a line between two bright points, then another. The connections are not fixed, not shared with anyone else, but they feel real in the moment. A figure nearby shifts, lying down as well. Their gaze follows a similar path across the sky, though you cannot know exactly what they see. There is no need to compare, no need to agree. The act of looking is enough. The fire crackles softly, its sound grounding you, keeping you connected to the space around you even as your attention drifts outward. The air has cooled further. You pull your arms slightly closer to your body, feeling the need for warmth. The others do the same, adjusting their positions, drawing closer to the fire or to one another. A quiet but meaningful detail is that shared body heat may have played an important role in staying warm during colder nights. Sleeping close together using hides and positioning carefully, early humans found ways to conserve warmth without modern materials. You notice how naturally the group forms around the fire. Not tightly, not crowded, but close enough to share warmth. Each person finds a place that balances comfort and space, creating a pattern that feels both practical and familiar. You shift slightly, aligning your body to feel the heat more evenly. The firelight flickers across your view, occasionally interrupting your sight of the stars, then clearing again as the flames move. Time passes. You cannot measure it precisely, but you feel it in the gradual deepening of the night, in the slow cooling of the air, in the steady rhythm of your breathing. Scholars remain divided on how early humans conceptualized time itself. Some suggest that time was experienced as a continuous flow marked by natural events rather than counted intervals. Others believe that even without formal systems, people may have developed ways of organizing time based on repeated patterns. As you lie there, the idea of measured time feels distant. There is no need to count. The night unfolds on its own. You close your eyes briefly, then open them again. The stars have shifted just slightly. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough that the pattern you traced earlier no longer aligns in the same way. It is a quiet reminder. Everything moves even when it appears still. You take a slow breath, letting the cool air fill your lungs, then release it gently. The fire continues to burn beside you, its warmth steady, its light constant. The group around you grows quieter still. Some have already drifted into sleep. Others remain awake, their attention fading gradually, their bodies relaxing into stillness. You feel that same pull, a gentle heaviness settling into your limbs, the kind that comes not from exhaustion, but from calm. You let your gaze rest on the sky one last time. The stars remain distant and steady. The fire glows beside you. The night holds you in its quiet rhythm, and slowly, without effort, you allow yourself to drift deeper into that stillness carried by the same patterns that have guided countless nights before this one. You drift somewhere between waking and sleep, aware of the fire's warmth and the quiet presence of others nearby, yet no longer fully focused on any single detail. The night holds you gently, not demanding attention, allowing your thoughts to move slowly without direction. At some point you open your eyes again. The fire has softened its flames lower, now reduced to a steady glow that pulses quietly in the darkness. The air feels cooler, more still. The sounds of the night have changed as well, fewer and more distant, as if even the world beyond the circle of light has settled into rest. You remain where you are, your body relaxed against the ground, your gaze drifting between the embers and the faint outlines of those around you. There is something different in this moment, not in the environment, not in the air or the light, but in the way you perceive it. The stillness feels deeper, more layered. You're aware not just of what is happening, but of how you're experiencing it. A widely supported understanding in studies of early human cognition is that the ability to reflect, to think about one's own thoughts likely develop gradually over time. This capacity, often called self-awareness, allows for imagination planning and the formation of more complex ideas about the world. You sense that awareness now. not as a sudden realization, but as a quiet presence. You think about the day, the movement across the land, the tracks that appeared and vanished, the distant figures on the horizon, the gathering, the fire, the image drawn on some stone, the rhythm that filled the air. Each moment feels connected, forming a sequence that exists within your mind even as the physical traces have begun to fade. You wonder if others around you hold the same sequence, if they remember it the same way. A subtle but meaningful detail is that memory in early humans was likely shaped strongly by repetition and shared experience. Without written records, knowledge had to be retained through observation practice and storytelling, reinforcing important details over time. You imagine how that might feel, to rely on memory not just for reflection but for survival. To carry knowledge entirely within the mind, you turn your head slightly looking at the figures around you. Some are asleep, their breathing slow and steady. Others remain still, perhaps awake, perhaps resting in that quiet space between. There is no clear boundary. The fire gives a soft crack, a small shift in the embers that sends a brief glow outward. The light flickers across the ground, across faces, then settles again. You notice how the shadows move with it. They stretch and contract, changing shape without warning, always returning to stillness. You find yourself watching those movements. They feel almost like thoughts, appearing, shifting, fading. Some researchers suggest that the development of the imagination may have been closely linked to these kinds of experiences where the mind begins to interpret and reinterpret what it sees, finding meaning even in simple changes of light and shadow. Others propose that imagination may have arisen from the need to anticipate, to plan for events that have not yet occurred. As you lie there, both ideas feel present. The shadows could be anything, a shape, a memory, a possibility. You close your eyes again just for a moment. Images begin to form, not clearly, not in sharp detail, but as impressions. The animal drawn on the wall, the movement of figures across the basin, the pattern of stars above you. They blend together, shifting slightly, not fixed in place. You open your eyes once more. The fire remains. The ground beneath you feels steady. The air cool and calm. There is a balance here, between what is real and what is imagined, between what is seen and what is remembered. Scholars continue to explore when humans began to fully engage in abstract thinking, the ability to consider ideas that are not directly tied to immediate sensory experience. Some evidence suggests this capacity was already emerging during this period, while other interpretations place its development later. You feel that uncertainty as something natural. It is not a boundary. It is a gradual unfolding. You shift slightly, adjusting your position as the ground cools further beneath you. Your body seeks warmth without thought, moving closer to the fire, closer to the others. The closeness feels important, not just for heat, but for presence. You are not alone in this experience. Even in silence, even in stillness, there is a shared awareness that connects you to those around you. You listen to the breathing of the group, slow, even, a quiet rhythm that replaces the sound of earlier movement. It is calming, steady. You feel your own breathing align with it, your body settling deeper into rest. The fire continues to glow, its light softer now, its warmth more subtle. The night deepens. Time passes, though you do not measure it. You simply exist within it. A gentle but important observation is that in environments like this, sleep patterns were likely more flexible than modern schedules. Without artificial light, people may have slept in segments, waking briefly during the night before returning to rest. You sense that possibility now, the idea that waking and sleeping are not fixed states, but part of a continuous cycle. You close your eyes again. The sounds fade further. The light softens. Your thoughts slow. And within this quiet space between awareness and rest, you feel the early shape of something that will grow over time. A mind that not only experiences the world, but reflects on it, imagines it, carries it forward. You drift gently, held by the warmth of the fire, the presence of others, and the quiet unfolding of thought itself. You do not notice the exact moment when night gives way to something lighter. There is no sudden change, no clear dividing line. Instead, it begins as a soft shift in the air, a slight thinning of darkness that your eyes register before your thoughts do. The stars above you lose a small part of their brightness, and the horizon far in the distance takes on the faintest hint of grey. You open your eyes fully. The fire beside you has nearly gone out, reduced to a quiet bed of ash with only a few dim points of red glowing beneath the surface. The warmth is still there, but weaker now, just enough to linger. The air feels colder than before. You draw your arms closer, noticing how your body reacts instinctively, seeking what little heat remains. Around you, others begin to stir in the same gradual way. A shift of a shoulder, a slow breath, a hand moving across the ground as someone repositions themselves. No one rushes to stand. The morning arrives gently. A commonly accepted understanding in prehistoric studies is that daily life was closely tied to natural light cycles. Without artificial lighting, activity patterns followed the rising and setting of the sun, creating a rhythm that aligned with the environment rather than an imposed schedule. You feel that rhythm now. Your body responds to the growing light without needing instruction. The coolness of the air, the fading of darkness, the subtle increase in visibility all signal the same thing. It is time to begin again. You sit up slowly, brushing your hands against the ground. The soil feels cooler than it did the evening before, holding the memory of the night rather than the warmth of the day. Small traces of ash cling to your fingers as you steady yourself. One of the figures near the center of the group leans forward, reaching into the remains of the fire. You watch as they gently move the ash aside, searching for any remaining heat. There it is. A faint glow, almost hidden, but still alive. They add a small piece of dry material, then another, breathing softly to encourage it. Smoke rises in a thin, wavering line, followed by the smallest flicker of flame. You recognize the process now. It is familiar. A small but revealing detail is that maintaining fire overnight required attention and care. Allowing it to go out completely would mean the effort of creating it again, which could be difficult under certain conditions. Preserving even a small ember made the transition into morning far easier. The flame grows slowly, feeding on what is given to it. You lean slightly closer, feeling the first touch of warmth return. The group begins to rise one by one. There is no signal, no command. The movement spreads naturally, each person responding in their own time, yet forming a collective pattern. You stand as well, stretching lightly, your muscles adjusting after the stillness of the night. The air brushes against your skin, cool but no longer sharp. The light continues to build, revealing more of the surrounding land. The hollow looks different now. Without the strong contrast of firelight and darkness, the details are softer, more even. The faint traces of past activity remain, but they blend more easily into the ground, less distinct than they seemed the evening before. You step a little further from the centre, looking around. The land beyond the hollow stretches out, once more unchanged in form, yet subtly different in feeling. The colours are muted, the edges less defined as the early light spreads slowly across the terrain. You notice how quiet everything is. Not silent, but calm. The sounds of the night have faded, and the sounds of the day have not yet fully begun. It is a moment between where the world seems to pause. Some researchers suggest that early morning may have been an important time for planning and observation, when the environment is still and the day's direction can be considered. Others believe that such structured planning may not have existed in a formal sense, with decisions emerging more fluidly as situations changed. As you stand there, it feels less like a deliberate pause and more like a natural one. A moment that exists because of the way the world moves. One of the figures walks toward the edge of the hollow, scanning the horizon. Another gathers a few remaining items from the ground. A third adjusts a piece of clothing, pulling it tighter as the air begins to shift. You notice how quickly the traces of the night begin to fade. The fire, once central, is now just one part of the space again. The image on the stone wall remains, but its presence feels quieter in the daylight, less animated, without the flicker of flame. You walk toward it, briefly looking at the lines again. They are still there, still clear, but they feel different now. Less alive, perhaps, or simply more still, or is it more still? Scholars continue to explore how context influences perception, how the same object or image can hold different meaning depending on light, time, and surrounding conditions. What feels powerful in one moment may seem ordinary in another. You understand that shift now. The image has not changed, but you have. You turn back toward the group. They are beginning to move again, their direction forming without discussion. The hollow has served its purpose. It offered rest, warmth, and a place to gather. Now it will be left behind. You take one last look. The faint circle of stones, the disturbed ground, the barely visible traces of presence. Soon they will fade. The wind will pass over this place, the sun will rise higher, the ground will settle, and what remains will be almost nothing. You step forward, joining the group as they leave the hollow. Your feet press into the soil, marking it briefly before lifting again. You carry the memory with you, not as something fixed, but as something that shifts just like the light, just like the land. The day begins once more, and you walk on. You move away from the hollow, the ground rising gently beneath your feet as the group returns to the open land. The early light has strengthened, now spreading evenly across the landscape, softening shadows and revealing detail in a quiet, gradual way. The air feels balanced. Not cold, not warm, just steady. You walk with the others, your steps falling into place without effort. The memory of the night remains with you, but it does not weigh heavily. It settles somewhere deeper, becoming part of a longer thread rather than standing alone. The land ahead is familiar in its openness, yet each step reveals something slightly different. A shift in soil, a change in colour, small variations that give the landscape its texture. After some time, the group slows again, not because of danger, not because of a visible change, but because something has been noticed. A patch of ground ahead draws attention, its surface slightly disturbed, scattered with small fragments that catch the light in irregular ways. You approach carefully. At first, it looks like nothing more than broken pieces of stone, but as you move closer, you begin to see the pattern. Flakes. Thin, sharp fragments similar to the ones you saw before when tools were being shaped. They lie across the ground in a loose cluster, some partially buried, others resting on the surface. You kneel, picking one up. The edge is still sharp. You turn it in your hand, noticing how its shape matches others nearby. This is not random breakage. It is the result of deliberate action. A well-established archaeological finding shows that areas where stone tools were made often contain large numbers of these flakes known as débitage. These scattered remains provide evidence of repeated activity, even when the finished tools themselves are no longer present. You look around more closely. The ground holds more signs than you first noticed. Slight depressions, subtle discoloration. A few larger stones positioned in ways that feel intentional. This was a place of work. Perhaps briefly, perhaps many times. A lesser-known detail is that some prehistoric sites show evidence of specialized areas where certain tasks were performed repeatedly. Tool-making, food preparation, and other activities may have been organized within a space even without permanent structures. You imagine what it must have looked like. People gathered here, shaping stone, testing edges, sharing knowledge through observation and repetition. The sounds of striking, the small fragments falling to the ground, the quiet focus of hands at work. Now only the fragments remain. You glance at the group. Some are examining the ground as you are. Others stand slightly apart, watching the surroundings. There is no urgency, but there is attention. This place matters even, and if only for a moment. You pick up another piece, comparing it to the first. The shapes are similar, but not identical. Each carries the mark of a different strike, a different angle, a different decision. Together they form a pattern of effort, of learning, of skill. You place the fragment back where you found it. There is no need to carry it. The knowledge it represents is already present. Researchers continue to explore how skills like tool-making were transmitted across generations. Some believe that imitation and practice were the primary methods, with younger individuals learning by watching and repeating. Others suggest that more structured forms of teaching may have existed, though evidence for this is difficult to confirm. As you stand there, it feels as though the land itself teaches. The fragments remain, offering clues to those who can read them. You rise slowly, brushing your hands against your legs. The sun has climbed higher and the light now falls more directly across the ground, making the flakes shine briefly before settling back into dullness. The group begins to move again. This time the direction shifts slightly, following a line that seems guided not by the visible horizon, but by something remembered. You follow. The ground becomes more uneven, scattered with larger stones and patches of exposed earth. The air carries a faint dryness, and the breeze has softened, moving less frequently. As you walk, you begin to notice something else. The spacing between individuals changes, not dramatically, but enough to feel intentional. Some move slightly ahead, others fall back, creating a loose pattern that allows for both connection and coverage of the surrounding space. It is not random. It feels like awareness, a quiet adjustment to the environment. Some scholars suggest that early human groups may have developed flexible movement patterns based on conditions, spreading out when visibility was needed, drawing closer when safety or communication became more important. Others argue that such patterns may have emerged naturally without conscious planning. As you move within this shifting arrangement, it feels fluid, responsive. You adjust your own position without the thinking, stepping slightly to one side, then forward, aligning with the movement around you. The land continues to stretch outward. No clear destination, no fixed path. And yet there is direction. You begin to sense how knowledge is carried here, not in objects, not in written form, but in movement. In the way the group navigates the land, responds to changes, recognizes subtle signs. Each step is informed by something that has been learned, remembered, passed on. You take another step, then another. The rhythm returns, steady, unbroken. The fragments of stone are left behind, scattered across the ground, their meaning preserved only for those who know how to see it. And you continue forward, carrying nothing in your hands, yet carrying something far less visible. Understanding. You continue across the open land, the fragments of stone fading behind you as the ground returns to its quiet, unmarked surface. The sun has climbed higher now, its warmth more consistent, pressing gently against your shoulders and back. The air feels dry and steady, carrying little scent, as if the world has settled into a calm, even state. The group moves without hesitation. Their pace is steady, their direction clear, even if you cannot see exactly what guides it. There is no visible marker ahead, no distinct landmark pulling you forward, and yet there is no uncertainty in their movement. You begin to feel something else emerging, not in the land, not in the sky, but in the way information seems to pass between individuals. A glance, a small shift in posture, the timing of a step. These are not random. They carry meaning. A widely accepted insight in anthropology suggests that before writing systems existed, human knowledge was transmitted entirely through memory and shared experience. Skill stories and survival strategies were passed down through observation, repetition, and communication within the group. You begin to notice how that transmission happens here. One of the figures at the front slows, slightly lowering their gaze toward the ground. Without turning, without signaling directly, the others adjust. Their pace shifts, their attention narrows, their movements align. You follow your body responding in the same quiet way. It feels almost automatic, as if you are being guided by something that is not spoken but understood. You look more closely at the ground. At first, you see only the usual patterns: soil, scattered stones, faint disturbances. But then slowly you begin to notice subtle differences. A line that does not follow the natural contour. A patch of ground that appears slightly compressed. You would not have noticed it before. Now you do. A small but revealing detail is that human perception can be trained to detect patterns that are nearly invisible at first glance. Early humans living in close connection with their environment likely developed a heightened sensitivity to such details, allowing them to interpret signs that others might miss. You feel that sensitivity beginning to grow within you. Not fully, not completely, but enough to shift how you see. The group moves around the area rather than directly through it. The adjustment is slight but deliberate. You follow the curve of their path, stepping carefully, maintaining the flow. No one explains, no one points. And yet the meaning is clear. Avoid, preserve, observe. You realize that this is another form of knowledge, not stored in objects, not fixed in place, fixed in place, but carried in behavior. Some researchers suggest that such non-verbal communication may have played a central role in early human societies, allowing for coordination without the need for constant vocalization. Others propose that spoken language once developed may have complemented these signals rather than replacing them. As you move within this system, it feels seamless. There is no separation between thought and action. One flows into the other. You glance at the others. Their attention remains focused but not tense. Their movements are calm but precise. Each person contributes to the group's awareness, even without direct interaction. You begin to understand how fragile this system is. Everything depends on memory, on attention, on the ability to notice and respond. A lesser-known aspect of early human life is how easily knowledge could be lost if it was not reinforced. Without writing, without permanent records, information existed only as long as it was remembered and practiced. A break in transmission could mean the disappearance of entire skills or understandings. You feel the weight of that idea, not as something heavy, but as something delicate. The knowledge around you is alive, but it is not fixed. It must be carried. The group slows again, this time coming to a full stop near a patch of ground that appears slightly different from the surrounding area. The soil is darker, more compact, with faint traces of something that once disturbed it. You step closer. There is a subtle pattern here, not immediately clear, but present. You kneel, touching the surface lightly. The texture is uneven, marked by small variations that suggest repeated contact. You look up at the others. They are observing as well, their attention focused, their movements minimal. This place holds something, perhaps not visible, perhaps not complete, but enough to be recognized. Scholars continue to explore how early humans interpreted such signs, whether they saw them as simple indicators of past activity or as something more meaningful. The absence of written explanation leaves much open to interpretation. You sit with that uncertainty. It does not feel like a gap, it feels like space. Room for thought, room for possibility. The group remains still for a moment longer, then begins to move again. The pause has served its purpose, the knowledge has been acknowledged. You rise and follow your steps, aligning once more with the steady rhythm. As you walk, you carry something new. Not an object, not a fixed idea, but an awareness of how easily knowledge can vanish, and how carefully it must be held. The land stretches ahead, unchanged in appearance, yet filled with traces that may never be fully seen. You continue forward, your senses open, your attention steady, and the quiet transmission of knowledge moves with you step by step. You move steadily across the land, your steps quiet, your attention open in a way that feels deeper than before. The air has grown warmer, but there is a shift within it now, something subtle that you begin to notice without fully understanding at first. The breeze changes. It is no longer steady and even. Instead, it comes in soft pulses, carrying with it faint variations in scent and temperature. You feel it brush across your skin, then fade, then return again slightly different each time. The group notices, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet adjustments of movement. A slight turn of the head. A pause that lasts just a little longer than usual. The rhythm continues, but with more attention given to the air itself. You lift your chin slightly, breathing in. The scent is faint. Dry grass, warm soil, something distant that you cannot quite place. A widely supported understanding in paleoclimatology is that the environment during this period was not stable in the way we often imagine. Climate shifts occurred over long and short timescales, influencing vegetation, water availability, and the movement of both animals and humans. You begin to sense that instability now, not as something dramatic, but as something constant. The land may look the same from one moment to the next, but it is always changing in small ways. The group moves toward a slightly elevated area, the ground rising gently underfoot. As you climb, the breeze becomes more noticeable, carrying a cooler edge despite the warmth of the sun. When you reach the top, the view opens again. The land ahead stretches farther than before, but something stands out. In the distance, a faint haze lingers near the horizon. It is not smoke, not clearly. It does not rise in a column or drift in a defined shape. Instead, it spreads thinly across the air, softening the outlines of what lies beyond. You narrow your eyes, trying to see more clearly. The others are already watching. A lesser-known observation is that early humans likely paid close attention to distant visual cues, such as haze cloud formations and changes in light. These subtle signs could indicate shifts in weather, the presence of fire, or changes in the landscape that might affect movement. If you feel that awareness now, the haze could mean many things. Moisture in the air, distant fog, dust carried by wind, you do not know. And that uncertainty matters. One of the figures steps forward, slightly adjusting their position to gain a better view. Another shifts to the side, scanning a different part of the horizon. The group spreads just enough to gather more information without losing connection. You follow their lead, stepping to a position where the land slopes downward again. From here, the haze appears to move, though it is difficult to tell if it is the air itself or simply your perspective changing. You watch it for a while. It does not approach. It does not disappear. It remains. Some researchers suggest that early humans developed an intuitive understanding of environmental patterns, allowing them to anticipate changes based on subtle signs. Others caution that while such awareness likely existed, it may not have been as precise as we imagine, with uncertainty always playing a role. You feel that balance here, awareness but not certainty. The group does not rush toward the haze. They do not turn away immediately either. Instead they wait, a quiet pause filled with observation. You stand among them, your breathing steady, your senses focused outward. The wind shifts again, carrying a slightly cooler sensation this time. You feel it move across your face, then down your arms, as if testing the space around you. The light changes as well. Not dramatically, but enough that the colours of the land seem slightly muted, the contrast softened. You notice how these small changes affect your perception. The world feels less defined, more fluid. You begin to understand how easily conditions can shift here, how quickly the familiar can become uncertain. The group makes a decision, not through words, but through movement. They begin to angle their path slightly away from the haze, choosing a direction that keeps distance while maintaining progress. You follow. The ground beneath your feet changes again, becoming firmer, more stable. The air steadies as well, though the faint presence of the haze remains at the edge of your awareness. You glance back once more. It is still there, unchanged, a reminder of something beyond your current path. Scholars continue to explore how environmental uncertainty shaped human behavior, influencing migration decision-making and the development of adaptability. The ability to respond to changing conditions may have been one of the most important traits for survival. As you walk, that adaptability feels present, not as a conscious strategy, but as a natural response. You adjust without thinking. You observe without forcing conclusions. You move forward while remaining aware of what lies beyond. The land stretches ahead, familiar in its openness, yet subtly altered by what you've seen. The air feels lighter again, the breeze steadier. The haze remains behind you. You take a slow breath, letting the moment settle. Then you continue your steps steady, your awareness shaped by the quiet understanding that the world is always shifting even when it appears still. You continue moving across the open ground, the distant haze now resting behind you, its presence fading into memory rather than sight. The air feels steadier again, though your awareness of its subtle changes remains. Each breath carries a quieter tension that was not there before. The land stretches wide in every direction. No boundaries, no clear edges, only gentle rises and dips, patches of grass, scattered stones, and the endless sky above. As you walk, you begin to notice something else. Distance. Not just the physical space between places, but the space between people. The group has spread out slightly more than before. Not in a way that breaks connection, but enough that each person occupies their own small area within the larger movement. You can still see them, still sense their presence. But there is more space now. You feel it, the quiet distance. A well-supported observation in anthropology suggests that early human groups were often small, sometimes only a few dozen individuals spread across vast landscapes. This meant encounters with others could be rare, separated by long stretches of time and distance. You begin to understand what that feels like. The world is large. You are part of a group, yet the space around you is immense. You glance to your left. One figure walks at a steady pace, their gaze focused forward. To your right, another moves slightly slower, their attention drifting between the ground and the horizon. Ahead, the group stretches out not in a line, but in a loose formation that shifts with each step. There is connection, but also separation. A lesser-known detail is that population density during this time was extremely low compared to today. Entire regions may have held only small groups, with vast areas remaining unoccupied for long periods. You imagine walking for days, weeks, and not encountering another group at all. The thought does not feel lonely in the way it might in your world. It feels normal, expected. You take another step, then another. The rhythm continues. Your feet press into the ground, leaving faint impressions that will soon disappear. The breeze moves lightly across the land, carrying little sound, little scent. The sky remains open, unchanged. Time stretches. not in a measurable way, but in feeling. Moments blend together. Movement becomes continuous. Some researchers propose that this kind of environment may have shaped human psychology in subtle ways, encouraging independence while still maintaining the need for group connection. Others suggest that social bonds may have been even stronger in such conditions, as each individual relied heavily on the few others around them. As you walk within this balance, both ideas feel present. You are part of something, and yet you're also alone within your own awareness. You look down at your hands as you walk. They move naturally with your steps relaxed steadier. The skin carries small traces of the land. Dust faint marks subtle textures that reflect where you have been. There is no separation between you and the environment. You are part of it. The group slows slightly, not stopping but adjusting. The spacing shifts again, bringing individuals a little closer together. The change is subtle, almost unnoticeable unless you are paying attention. You realize that distance is not fixed. It changes, expands, contracts, depending on what is needed. Scholars continue to explore how early human groups maintained cohesion across space, how they balanced the need to spread out for resources with the need to remain connected for safety and communication. The answers are not fully clear, but the patterns suggest a flexible system. You feel that flexibility now. It is not planned, it is lived. The land begins to change once more. The ground becomes slightly uneven with small dips that collect darker soil. The grasses grow thicker in patches, their colour deeper, their texture denser. The air carries a faint new scent, something slightly richer, more layered. You breathe it in. It suggests life. Water perhaps, or vegetation that holds moisture. The group adjusts direction, slightly drawn toward that subtle change. You follow your steps, aligning without thought. The distance between you and the others narrows just a little more. Not tightly, just enough. You feel the presence of the group more clearly again. The quiet awareness of others nearby. The shared movement, the shared direction. You glance ahead. The land dips gently, leading toward a lower area where the vegetation thickens. The colour shifts, the texture deepens, the air feels slightly cooler as you approach. You realise that even in a vast world there are places where life gathers, where resources concentrate, where paths cross even if only briefly. Some researchers suggest that such areas may have served as natural meeting points, locations where different groups could encounter one another over time. Others argue that these overlaps may have been less frequent, with groups carefully avoiding one another to reduce competition. You carry that uncertainty with you. The idea that even in a world so open there are points of connection. You continue walking, the ground softening slightly beneath your feet. The air changes again. The scent becomes clearer now. Water. You cannot see it yet, but you know it is near. The group moves toward it with quiet certainty, and as you follow, you feel the distance around you shift once more. Not gone, but held within something shared. A world vast enough to separate, and small enough to connect. You move toward the subtle promise of water, the air growing cooler with each step, the scent becoming clearer, more defined. The land dips gently, guiding you downward into a space where life gathers more easily. The ground beneath your feet softens, not dramatically, but enough to feel the difference. The soil holds more moisture here, giving slightly under your weight before settling again. The grasses are thicker, their colour deeper, brushing softly against your legs as you pass. The group slows, not stopping entirely but easing into a quieter pace, as if the presence of water requires a different kind of attention. The spacing between individuals shifts again, drawing slightly closer without crowding. You can hear it now, a faint sound at first, almost lost in the movement of the wind, then clearer, water, flowing slowly, steadily somewhere just ahead. You step forward, your gaze moving between the ground and the space in front of you. The land opens slightly, revealing a narrow channel where water moves through the earth, its surface reflecting the light in soft, shifting patterns. You approach the edge. The stream is not wide, but it feels significant. The water moves with quiet purpose, slipping around small stones, forming gentle ripples that catch the light and release it again. You kneel, lowering your hand. The coolness meets your skin, instantly sharper than the air, grounding in a way that feels immediate and real. You cup your hand and bring the water to your lips, tasting its clarity. It feels essential, A widely accepted understanding in human history is that water sources like this were central to survival shaping, not only movement but also patterns of settlement even in early mobile groups. These places offered more than just water. They attracted animals, supported plant growth, and created pockets of life within the wider landscape. You look around and see that life now. Tracks press into the damp soil along the edges. Some fresh, others older, softened by time. Small plants grow more densely here, their leaves fuller, their colour richer. The group spreads out along the stream. Some drink, others watch. A few move slowly along the edge, their eyes scanning the ground, the water, the surrounding space. You remain kneeling for a moment longer, letting the coolness of the water linger on your hands. A small but interesting detail is that water sources often became informal gathering points for multiple species, creating moments where humans and animals shared the same space, though not always at the same time. These overlapping patterns left traces that could be read by those who knew how to look. You begin to see those traces more clearly, a deeper impression where something heavier stepped, a series of lighter marks moving in a different direction, subtle disturbances that suggest movement layered over time. You rise slowly, stepping back from the edge. The air here feels different, cooler, more alive. The breeze carries a hint of moisture, softening the dryness you felt earlier. It brushes across your face, your arms, bringing a quiet sense of relief. The group begins to gather again, not far from the water. They do not move away immediately. Instead, they settle into a loose formation, their attention shifting inward once more. Some sit, others remain standing, their posture relaxed but aware. You join them, lowering yourself to the ground. The soil here feels softer, more forgiving. It holds the shape of your hand for a moment before easing back into place. You look toward the water again. Its movement is constant, unchanging in rhythm even as it shifts around stones and bends in the land. You realize how steady it feels. In a world where so much changes, where paths fade and traces disappear, the water continues, flowing, moving, a quiet continuity. Some researchers suggest that early humans may have developed a sense of place around recurring features like water sources, recognizing them not just as resources, but as points of return within an otherwise shifting landscape. Others argue that such meaning may not have been fully formed, with movement driven primarily by immediate need. As you sit here, it feels like more than need. There is familiarity, a sense that this place matters, even if only for a short time. The group remains still for a while. No one rushes to leave. The pause feels earned. The journey slows here, not because it must, but because it can. You notice how the sound of the water blends with the quiet movements of the group. The soft rustle of clothing, the shift of bodies against the ground, the faint breath of wind moving through the grasses. All of it forms a gentle pattern, a calm rhythm that settles into your awareness. You lean back slightly, resting your hands behind you. The sky above remains wide and open, the light steady, the day continuing its quiet progression. You close your eyes for a moment. The sound of the water remains. The coolness of the air lingers. The presence of the group surrounds you. When you open your eyes again, nothing has changed, and yet everything feels slightly different. More grounded, more connected. The group begins to move again, slowly rising their direction, forming without words. You stand with them, brushing your hands against your legs, feeling the softness of the soil give way to firmer ground as you step back. You take one last look at the stream. It continues to flow unchanged by your presence. Then you turn and follow the group, leaving the water behind, carrying with you the quiet sense of its constancy as you step once more into the wider land. You move away from the stream, the soft ground gradually giving way to firmer earth once again. The coolness of the water lingers on your skin for a while, fading slowly as the air dries your hands and the warmth of the day settles back in. The group resumes its steady pace. There is no urgency, no sense of leaving something important behind. The water remains where it is constant, reliable. It will still be there whether you stay or move on. You walk with that understanding. The land opens again, returning to its familiar rhythm of grasses, soil and scattered stone. The horizon stretches wide, unbroken, yet it feels different now, as if each place you pass leaves a quiet imprint on how you see the next. After some time, you begin to notice the group drawing slightly closer together. not tightly. But enough to feel a shift. There is a change in the way they move, more awareness of one another, more attention to proximity. You feel it in your own steps, adjusting without thinking, aligning with the presence around you. A widely supported idea in the study of early human behavior is that strong social bonds were essential for survival. Cooperation within small groups increased the chances of finding food, avoiding danger, and raising young successfully. You begin to sense those bonds here, not expressed through words or gestures that stand out, but through consistency, through staying close, through moving together. One figure ahead slows slightly, allowing another to catch up. There is no signal, no acknowledgement yet. The adjustment happens smoothly, naturally. You watch it, recognizing the quiet care within the movement. A subtle but revealing detail is that emotional connections likely played a significant role in early human groups, even if they were not expressed in ways we would easily recognize. Care, attachment, and mutual reliance may have been deeply embedded in daily life. You glance at the others. Their faces remain calm, their expression steady, but there is something in the way they remain aware of each other that feels familiar. You imagine the shared experiences, walking together across long distances, resting near the same fires, facing the same uncertainties. These moments build something over time, something that does not need to be spoken. The land begins to rise slightly, leading you toward a higher stretch of ground. The air feels a little thinner. Here, the breeze more noticeable as it moves across the open space. You climb with the group, your steps steady, your breathing even. At the top, the view expands. The horizon feels farther away. The land stretches in all directions, a wide, continuous surface that seems to go on without end. You pause for a moment, taking it in. There is a quiet sense of scale, a reminder of how much space exists beyond what you can see. Some researchers suggest that early humans may have developed a strong spatial awareness, an ability to understand and remember large areas of land without maps or markers. Others argue that this understanding may have been more immediate based on recent experience rather than long-term mental mapping. As you stand there, it feels like both are possible. You recognize the land you have walked, and yet so much remains unknown. The group does not linger long. They begin to move again, descending from the rise, their direction steady. You follow your steps, carrying you back into the rhythm. The spacing between individuals adjusts once more, settling into a pattern that feels balanced. Not too close, not too far. You notice how this balance changes depending on the environment. Closer near water, more spread out across open ground. It is not fixed. It responds. Scholars continue to explore how flexible social structures may have been during this period. Some theories suggest that roles within groups could shift depending on need rather than remaining rigid. Others propose that certain patterns of behavior may have been more consistent, shaped by long-standing traditions. You walk within that uncertainty. There is no clear boundary between structure and flexibility, only movement, only response. The sun begins to lower slightly, though it is still high enough to keep the land bright. The light softens just a little, the shadows beginning to lengthen again. You feel the day moving forward, not in measured time, but in sensation, the warmth changing, the light shifting, the air adjusting. The group continues their pace unchanged. You begin to notice small interactions, a glance exchanged between two figures, a slight adjustment in direction that brings someone closer to another, a shared pause that lasts just a moment longer than necessary. These are small things, easy to miss, but they carry meaning. You realize that a connection here is not built through large gestures. It is built through repetition, through presence, through the simple act of staying together. You take another step, then another. The ground beneath you remains steady. The air moves gently around you. The group continues forward, each person part of the whole, each movement contributes to the shared rhythm. And as you walk, you feel something settle quietly within you, a sense of belonging, not defined, not spoken, but present. You move with it, carrying it forward as the land stretches ahead, and the day continues its slow, steady unfolding. You continue across the gently rising land, the warmth of the afternoon beginning to soften into something calmer, less direct. The sun lowers slowly and the light shifts in a way that feels familiar now, stretching longer across the ground, revealing subtle textures that were hidden before. Your steps remain steady. The group moves as it always has, without urgency, without pause. yet with a quiet sense of direction that carries you forward. After some time, the land changes again. The ground becomes slightly uneven, scattered with low stones and patches of exposed earth. A cluster of rock formations appears ahead, not forming a full shelter, but offering a break in the open landscape. The space feels different, more contained, more sheltered from the steady breeze. The group moves toward it. You follow, stepping carefully as the ground shifts beneath your feet. Small stones move slightly under your weight, then settle again. As you approach, you notice the light beginning to change more noticeably. The brightness of the day fades into a warmer tone, the colours of the land deepening, the shadows stretching longer. Evening is approaching. The group slows, then gradually comes to a stop near the rock formations. You stand with them, feeling the shift from movement to stillness. It happens naturally, without signal, without discussion. A widely recognized insight from prehistoric studies is that sleep in early human societies often occurred in open or semi-sheltered environments, with groups choosing locations that offered some protection from wind predators and temperature changes. You begin to see that choice here. The rocks break the wind. The ground is slightly elevated. The space allows for both visibility and shelter. You step closer, running your hand lightly along the surface of one of the stones. It's rough, cool, holding the memory of the day's heat in some places, the coolness of shade in others. The group begins to settle. Some gather small materials from the surrounding area. Others sit their movements slower, now their bodies easing into rest after the long walk. You lower yourself to the ground, feeling the firmness beneath you. The air cools gradually. The warmth of the day does not disappear all at once, but it begins to retreat, replaced by a softer, more balanced temperature. A lesser-known observation is that early humans likely adapted their sleeping habits to environmental conditions, sometimes choosing higher ground to avoid moisture or areas with natural barriers to reduce exposure. You notice how this place meets those needs. It is not perfect, but it is enough. The group forms a loose circle again, though less defined than before. There is no central fire yet, but the space suggests that one will soon be made. You watch as one figure begins to prepare a small area, clearing debris, arranging stones. The process feels familiar now. You have seen it before, and yet each time carries its own quiet variation. You glance upward. The sky has begun to change. The blue softens, fading into warmer tone near the horizon. The first hint of evening spreads slowly, not rushing, not forcing its arrival. You feel the shift within your body. The slowing, the quieting, the sense that the day is nearing its end. Some researchers suggest that dreams may have played an important role in early human cognition, possibly influencing memory, creativity, and problem-solving. Others propose that while dreaming likely occurred, its significance may not have been consciously recognized in the same way we interpret it today. You think about that as you sit there. The idea that even in sleep, the mind continues to move, to shape experiences, to connect moments. You lie back slowly, your gaze returning to the sky. The light continues to fade. The first stars begin to appear again, faint at first, then clearer as the darkness deepens. The group remains quiet. No one rushes the transition from day to night. It happens as it always does, gradually. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. The colours have shifted further. The air has cooled slightly more. You can feel it on your skin in the way your body adjusts, seeking warmth, preparing for rest. The figure preparing the fire works carefully, their movements slow, deliberate. You watch as the small ember is placed, as the first thin thread of smoke rises. The process begins again, familiar, reassuring. You realize how important this repetition is, not just for survival, but for rhythm, for continuity. Scholars continue to explore how repeated daily patterns may have shaped early human life, creating a sense of stability within an otherwise unpredictable environment. The regular return of certain actions may have provided a foundation for more complex behaviors over time. You feel that stability now. The fire will be lit. The group will gather. The night will settle. You do not need to think about it. It simply happens. You adjust your position slightly, feeling the ground beneath you, the air around you, the quiet presence of others nearby. The world slows. The light fades. The fire begins to glow. And as the day gently gives way to night once more, you allow yourself to settle into the familiar rhythm carried by patterns that repeat across time, steady and unbroken. You remain near the forming fire as evening deepens, the last warmth of the day fading gently into the surrounding air. The rocks nearby hold a quiet stillness, their surfaces catching the last traces of light before surrendering to shadow. The flame begins small, a faint glow, then a flicker, then something steadier. You watch it grow, feeling the familiar warmth return in soft waves against your skin. Around you, the group settles into place, their movements slower, now shaped by the quiet transition into night. There is no rush, no urgency, only a steady return to something known. You notice how easily this moment comes together. The space, the fire, the presence of others. It feels practiced, not in a formal sense, but through repetition, through countless evenings that have unfolded in similar ways. A widely supported idea in the study of early human societies is that repeated daily patterns may have laid the foundation for later structured behavior. Over time, consistent actions can shape expectations, creating a sense of order even without formal rules. You begin to feel that order here, not imposed, but emerging. The fire grows stronger, its light spreading outward, illuminating faces, hands the ground beneath you. Shadows form again, shifting wildly as the flames move. You watch the patterns they create. They are never the same, and yet always familiar. A quiet detail that often goes unnoticed is how much time early humans may have spent simply being still during evenings like this. Without artificial distractions, moments of rest and reflection likely filled much of the night, allowing the mind to wander, to settle, to process the day. You feel that stillness now. It surrounds you. You lean slightly forward, extending your hands toward the fire. The heat meets your skin, steady and reassuring. Behind you, the air remains cool, creating a gentle contrast that anchors your awareness. The group sits together, not tightly, but close enough to share warmth. You glance at them one by one. Their faces are calm, their movements minimal, each person present yet inward in their own way. You begin to notice something else, a shift in the way people hold themselves. Not just relaxed, but settled, as if the day has been carried fully and now can be set down. Some researchers suggest that this transition from activity to rest may have played a role in shaping early emotional and cognitive patterns, giving space for reflection and memory. Others believe that such interpretations may place too much structure on what could have been a more fluid experience. As you sit within this quiet, both ideas seem possible. The mind slows, but it does not stop. You look toward the horizon. The last light has nearly disappeared now, leaving only a faint glow where the sky meets the land. Above, the stars begin to emerge more clearly, their presence growing as the darkness deepens. You feel the change in the air. Cooler, stiller. The fire becomes more central, its warmth more necessary. You adjust your position slightly, drawing a little closer. The ground beneath you feels firm, steady, holding you in place. You notice how the group forms around the fire without instruction. Each person finds a place that feels balanced, connected. You begin to understand how this pattern repeats across time. Not exactly the same, but close enough to feel continuous. A subtle but meaningful detail is that such repeated gatherings may have reinforced group identity, creating a shared sense of belonging even without formal recognition. These quiet moments together could have shaped how the individuals understood their place within the group. You feel that sense now. Not as something spoken, but as something present. You belong here within this circle, within this rhythm. The fire crackles softly, it sounds steady and familiar. You listen to it. Each small shift, each brief spark part of a larger pattern. The night continues to settle. The sky darkens fully. The stars brighten. You feel your body responding. Your breathing slows. Your muscles relax. The tension of the day fades. You glance once more at the others. Some have already closed their eyes. Others remain awake, their gaze drifting between the fire and the sky. There is no clear boundary between waking and rest. It happens gradually, naturally. Scholars continue to explore how early humans may have experienced transitions like this between activity and rest, awareness and sleep. Without strict schedules, these shifts likely followed internal rhythms as much as external ones. You feel that rhythm now? It carries you gently. You lean back slightly, letting your body settle more fully against the ground. The firelight flickers across your view. The air cools around you. The stars remain steady above. You close your eyes for a moment, then open them again. Nothing has changed, and yet everything feels quieter. More distant. You take a slow breath, then another. The fire burns. The group rests. The night holds you in its calm, steady presence, and you allow yourself to drift, not fully asleep, not fully awake, carried by the same gentle rhythm that has guided so many nights before this one. You wake again without knowing exactly when the shift occurred. The fire has dimmed, reduced to a low, steady glow. The air feels cooler than before, carrying that quiet stillness that comes just before the world begins to stir. The sky above you has changed, the deep darkness softening slightly at the edges, hinting at the approach of morning. You sit up slowly. Around you the group remains mostly still, though. Small movements begin to appear. A hand shifts. Someone turns onto their side. Another draws their covering a little closer. The night is ending. You feel it in the air. You feel it in your body. There is no need to check the sky for confirmation. The rhythm has already reached you. A well-supported understanding in early human studies is that the transition from fully nomadic life toward more settled patterns did not happen suddenly. It emerged slowly over thousands of years as groups began to spend longer periods in certain areas when conditions allowed. You begin to sense the earliest shape of that shift now, not in a permanent structure, not in a defined settlement, but in hesitation. The group does not rise immediately. They remain where they are a little longer than expected, as if considering the space around them in a different way. You stand brushing your hands lightly against your legs. The ground beneath you feels familiar now, marked by the faint traces of where you rested. Small impressions, slight disturbances, nothing that will last but enough to show that you are here. You look around at the rock formations, the shelter they provided, the way the wind moved around them. The way the fire sat within the space. It feels known, recognized. A lesser-known detail is that some early human groups may have returned to the same locations repeatedly across seasons, creating a loose pattern of temporary stays rather than continuous movement. These places were not permanent homes, but they held familiarity. You feel that familiarity now. It is not attachment in the way you might think of it, but it is close. You notice how the group begins to move more slowly than before. There is no immediate gathering of materials, no quick preparation to leave. Instead, there is a pause, a lingering. Some walk a short distance away, then return. Others remain seated, looking out across the land as if measuring something unseen. You step a little further from the fire, turning to look back at the space. The circle of stones remains, the faint marks on the ground, the subtle arrangement of the place. It would be easy to leave, and yet for a moment it feels as though leaving is not the only option. Some researchers suggest that the idea of staying in one place even briefly may have begun with moments like this when conditions allowed for rest and familiarity to take hold. Others argue that such pauses were always temporary, with movement remaining the dominant pattern for survival. You stand within that uncertainty, the possibility of staying, the certainty of moving. The group begins to gather more deliberately now. Not rush, but more defined. The pause is ending. The rhythm returns. You feel it shift within you as well. The sense of stillness gives way to motion. You take a slow breath, letting the cool air settle in your lungs. The sky brightens slightly. The horizon takes on a pale tone, the first light spreading gently across the land. You glance upward. The stars are fading. Not disappearing all at once, but slowly retreating as the light grows stronger. The night is giving way. You look once more at the space around you. The rocks, the ground, the place that held you through the night. Soon it will be empty again, or perhaps not empty, just waiting. Scholars continue to explore how early humans may have perceived place and return, whether certain locations held meaning beyond immediate use. Without written records, much remains uncertain, shaped by interpretation and limited evidence. You carry that uncertainty with you. It does not feel like something missing. It feels like something open. You step back toward the group. They are ready now. The movement begins again. You take your place among them, your steps aligning with the familiar rhythm. As you walk away, you do not look back immediately. But after a few steps, you turn. The space is already changing. The light shifts. The shadow The traces begin to fade. You hold the image for a moment longer. Then you turn forward again. The land stretches ahead. The day begins, and you move on carrying the quiet sense that some places, even without walls or markers, leave something behind. You move forward with the group once more, the place behind you already beginning to soften in your memory. The land opens again, wide and steady, yet something about your awareness has changed. You carry a quiet sense of what was left behind even as your steps carry you onward. The morning light grows stronger. The pale tones of early dawn deepen into clearer colour, revealing more detail in the ground, the grasses, the distant horizon. The air feels fresh, balanced between cool and warm, holding that brief moment where the day has not yet fully taken shape. You walk in silence, not empty similarness, but something fuller shaped by everything you have experienced. The fire, the markings on stone, the rhythm of sound, the shared stillness. Each moment feels connected now, part of something larger that you are only beginning to understand. A widely recognized truth in the study of early human history is that much of this time remains beyond our full knowledge. Without written records, only fragments remain preserved in stone, in bones, in traces left behind by chance. You feel the weight of that absence, not as something heavy, but as something vast. So much has happened here. So much has been lived, felt, understood, and yet so little remains. You glance at the ground beneath your feet. Each step you take leaves a mark, faint and temporary. The soil shifts slightly, holding the shape of your foot for a moment before settling back into itself. You know it will not last. A small but striking detail is that most evidence of early human life has been lost to time. Organic materials decay. Footprints disappear. Even entire camps can vanish without leaving clear signs. What survives is only a tiny fraction of what once existed. You begin to understand that this is the nature of this world. It does not preserve everything. It allows moments to pass. You look ahead. The group continues their movement steady, unchanged. They do not seem concerned with what has been lost. Their attention remains focused on what is present, on what is needed now. You follow your steps, aligning with theirs. The land stretches outward, familiar yet still holding endless variation. Each rise, each dip, each patch of ground offers something new, even if only in small ways. You feel the continuity of movement, the steady progression forward. Some researchers suggest that the gaps in our understanding of this period may be as important as the evidence we do have. The absence of information invites interpretation, encouraging different perspectives on how early humans lived and thought. Others caution that too much interpretation can lead us away from what little evidence remains. You walk within that space, between what is known and what is imagined. You think back to the markings on the stone, the lines that held meaning even if you could not fully read them. You think of the rhythm that filled the night, the pattern that lingered after the sound had faded. You think of the distant figures across the basin present for a moment, then gone. All of it feels real, and yet none of it leaves a clear record. You realize that this is what makes this time so difficult to fully understand. It is not empty, it is full of experiences that simply did not remain. Scholars remain divided on how to interpret this period of human history, sometimes called the missing thousands of years. Some argue that it represents a slow and steady development of behavior, gradually building toward more recognizable patterns. Others suggest that there may have been sudden changes, moments of rapid transformation that are not fully captured in the surviving evidence. You feel that uncertainty as something natural. It does not disrupt the experience. It deepens it. You continue walking your steps, steady, your breathing calm. The air moves gently around you. The sky remains open. The group remains close. You notice how your awareness has shifted. You no longer see the land as empty space. You see it as layered, filled with traces even when they are not visible. You begin to sense how much has been lost, and how much still remains hidden in ways that are difficult to reach. You take another step, then another. The rhythm continues. The world moves forward just as it always has. You carry the memory of what you have seen not as something fixed, but as something that changes each time you think of it. The fire will fade, the markings will weather, the paths will disappear, but the experience remains carried within those who lived it. And now within you, You walk on the land stretching ahead, the past settling quietly behind you. A vast expanse of time that cannot be fully explained, yet can still be felt. You keep walking, the rhythm of your steps soft and steady, as if the land itself is guiding you forward. The morning has fully arrived now, light spreading across everything in a calm and even way. The air feels clear, the horizon open, the world stretching endlessly ahead. And yet something begins to change. Not in the land, not in the sky, but in how you feel within it. You notice how your attention no longer reaches outward in the same way. The need to observe every detail, every shift in ground or air begins to soften. The awareness remains, but it no longer feels as sharp as urgent. It settles, like a breath that has finally found its rhythm. The group continues beside you, their movement unchanged, their presence steady. They do not stop. They do not turn back. They move forward just as they always have, carried by patterns that have no clear beginning and no fixed end. You walk with them for a while longer. Then slowly, without any signal, without any clear moment of separation, you begin to feel a distance forming, not physical, something quieter. The connection that held you so closely within this world begins to loosen, not breaking, just easing. You look around once more. The land remains. The figures move. The air carries its familiar balance. But it feels as though you are no longer fully within it. A widely accepted understanding in human history is that the story of our species did not begin with written records or visible civilizations. It began in moments like these to spread across seasons and years, shaped by lives that left only the faintest traces behind. You feel that truth now, not as an idea, but as something experienced. You think of everything you have seen, the fire carried from night to morning, the markings on stone that held meaning without words, the rhythm that filled the air, then faded into silence, the distant figures present for a moment, then gone, the paths walked without being marked, the places returned to without being named. A small but powerful detail is that the vast majority of human history exists in this form, without written memory, without clear records. What we know is only a fragment of what was lived. You begin to understand the scale of that absence, not as something empty, but as something full beyond measure. You take one last look at the group. They continue moving steady and certain their presence, grounded in a world that does not need explanation to exist. You feel a quiet sense of gratitude for having been here, for having seen even briefly how life unfolded in this distant time. Some researchers suggest that the mystery of this period may never be fully resolved, that there will always be gaps in our understanding. Others believe that with time, new discoveries may continue to reveal more slowly, filling in the missing pieces. You carry that uncertainty with you. It feels appropriate. The past does not need to be complete to be meaningful. You take a slow breath. The air feels lighter now. The connection to the land, to the group, begins to fade gently, like a sound moving further into the distance. You do not resist it, you allow it. The figures grow less distinct, the landscape softens, the details blur, and gradually, without effort, without resistance, you step back from this world. Not all at once, but slowly, as if the memory itself is settling into place. You return to stillness, to quiet, to the present. The journey lingers not as a clear sequence, but as a feeling, a sense of having moved through something vast and unknowable. And now, as everything softens around you, as the edges of thought grow lighter, you can allow that feeling to fade as well. Let your breathing slow, let your body rest, let the quiet settle fully. The land is far away now. The fire has dimmed, the voices are gone. Only calm remains. You drift gently, carried by the same steady rhythm that has guided you through every step of this journey. And as that rhythm softens into silence, you find yourself at rest. The night settles around you once more, though now it feels closer, softer, more familiar. There is no need to hold on to the details, no need to remember every step. The feeling is enough, a quiet warmth, a steady calm. You can imagine the faint glow of a distant fire. Not bright, not demanding, just present. You can imagine the open sky above, wide and endless, holding its silent patterns without asking anything of you. Your body feels still.
Support.
At ease. The world beyond this moment fades into something distant and unimportant. There is only this quiet, this rest, this gentle sense of drifting. Your breathing slows further deep and even. Your thoughts grow softer like echoes fading into the background. And in that soft fading, you can let go. Let go of the movement. Let go of the questions. Let go of the need to understand. The past remains where it is. The present holds you here, safe, calm, at rest. You settle deeper into that stillness carried by the quiet rhythm of breath and time, until even that fades into something softer, something lighter, and eventually into sleep. Sweet dreams.